I was adrift in the haze of labor, battling primal pain and exhaustion, my own sister, Casey, launched a betrayal so profound it still chills me to my core. She didn't just quietly alter my newborn's identity. She seized that incredibly vulnerable moment to change his name, effectively trying to snatch a piece of him before I'd even fully held him. And then, with a calculated cruelty that still baffles me, she weaponized the very system designed to protect children, reporting us to Child Protective Services for supposed abuse. All with the chilling, self-serving goal of claiming my son as her own. I remember my voice, raspy and raw from pushing, cracking as I pleaded with her to stop trying to grasp the enormity of her actions. But my pleas were met with a guttural, almost primal scream that ripped through the sterile delivery room air. Her eyes, normally a soft hazel, were wild, fixated on some internal twisted narrative as she shrieked, "Leonardo was mine from the beginning. You killed my baby, so I took yours." The words hung heavy, a dark cloud of delusion and accusation, revealing a horrifying depth of grief I couldn't comprehend, yet was now inexplicably tied to. Stunned and speechless, I could only stay silent. That harrowing, emotionally scarring incident occurred 5 months ago. Just last night, 5 months after that traumatic event, the chilling specter of her obsession returned. I glanced out the window and saw her, a desolate, almost spectral figure, standing barefoot on our wet lawn. The cold, relentless rain plastered her hair to her face, blurring the edges of a reality already distorted. She clutched a rain-soaked photograph, its glossy surface reflecting the distant streetlights. As I watched, a shiver tracing its way down my spine, she lifted it close, murmuring to the image of Leonardo DiCaprio, her voice a fragile, broken whisper carried on the whine. He was supposed to be mine. It all began innocently enough. I had decided to name my son Leonardo, a decision steeped in poignant remembrance, to honor my late childhood best friend who had tragically passed away a couple of years prior. At my baby shower, everyone, from my closest confidants to distant relatives, showered me with warmth and congratulations, thinking the name choice was utterly sweet and heartfelt. Everyone, that is, except my sister, Casey. A palpable tension filled the room as she abruptly rose from her seat, her movements sharp and decisive. With a resounding slam that made the porcelain teacups rattle, her palms crashed onto the table. Her voice, laced with an indignant fury that shocked us all, pierced the festive atmosphere. "That's my baby name," she declared, as if laying claim to a sacred relic. "You know how much I love Leonardo DiCaprio and I plan to name my baby that since forever." We, bewildered, attempted to gently remind Casey that she wasn't even in a relationship, much less expecting a child. Surely she could see the logic, but she wasn't having it. Her face contorted into a mask of pure rage as she shrieked that we were traitors, abandoning her dream. She then dramatically packed her belongings, stuffing them into an oversized tote bag, and stormed out, pausing only to deliver a chilling parting shot. "See you all in court." True to her word, a mere 2 days later, a stark, official-looking letter arrived in the mail. My heart pounded as I tore it open, only to find a legalistic demand. I had precisely 24 hours to relinquish my chosen name, Leonardo, or face unspecified but undoubtedly dire consequences. My family, recognizing the escalating crisis, immediately called an emergency intervention. That evening, we all gathered in Mom's living room, the air thick with apprehension. We tried, with the utmost gentleness and patience, to explain to Casey why I simply couldn't give up the name, why it held such deep personal significance, but reason seemed lost on her. Casey's face was a furious, angry tomato, flushed crimson with unyielding stubbornness. She kept interrupting, her voice shrill, to insist that my dad friend, a phrase she uttered with chilling disregard, would surely understand that this name, this dream of Leonardo, had been her only ambition in life since she was a little girl. We stood our ground, our resolve hardening. Through one of my lawyer friends, we were able to definitively prove to her that one simply cannot sue another over a baby name. Realizing her legal threat was baseless, she pivoted, delivering a desperate ultimatum. The name was hers, or she would sever all contact with us. In a moment of silent, collective agreement, we all simultaneously pointed toward the door, calling her bluff. Her eyes widened, a flicker of genuine shock momentarily displacing the fury, as she realized we meant it. Then, in an angry, defeated tone, laced with disdain, she spat, "Fine, you can have this stupid name." We genuinely believed that was the end of it. For the next 3 months, we heard absolutely nothing from her, a silence that felt like a fragile peace. But then, my Labor Day arrived. The irony was not lost on me. I was literally in the throes of giving birth, pushing with all my might, when Casey, with a dramatic flair that could only belong to her, burst through the delivery room door. She clutched a teddy bear like a trophy, her voice echoing off the sterile walls as she triumphantly bellowed, "Michael is here." Our entire family, even the experienced nurses, looked utterly bewildered, their faces a tableau of confusion. My husband, Samuel, his brow furrowed, managed to ask what on earth she meant. That's when Casey beamed, an unsettlingly smug grin spreading across her face, and rubbed her undeniably flat stomach. "I'm pregnant, too," she declared, as if presenting a grand solution. "You said I couldn't have the name because I wasn't pregnant, so I went out and became pregnant." "Problem solved," she seemed to suggest, with a self-satisfied nod. We simply stared at her, as if she had suddenly grown 5 heads. The hospital security, alerted by the commotion, swiftly intervened, gently but firmly escorting her out while she continued to scream indignantly about fairness and justice. An hour later, as the world softened around me, I was finally holding my son for the very first time. His tiny hand curled around my finger. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated bliss. That peace, however, was shattered when a nurse, looking distinctly uncomfortable, entered the room. "There's been an issue with your paperwork," she began hesitantly. "It says here, the baby's name is Michael, my husband." Samuel shot up from his chair like a hawk spotting its prey, his protective instincts flaring. While I continued to cradle our precious Leonardo, Samuel launched into an immediate investigation, discovering that the hospital documents had been mysteriously altered, differing drastically from what we had submitted. It became horrifyingly clear Casey had actually attempted to officially change our baby's name in the hospital system while I was in active labor, vulnerable and unaware. Thankfully, the hospital staff quickly fixed the egregious error, but the message was undeniably delivered. Casey was determined, a force of obsessive will. The very next morning, while Samuel and I were still recovering, adjusting to the beautiful chaos of new parenthood, my brother called, his voice strained with alarm. "Casey's at the hospital," he reported grimly. "She's hurt really badly." As the full, shocking story unfolded, it painted a picture of utter desperation. Turns out, Casey had woken up at 5 a.m. that morning, consumed by her singular fixation. She had spent the early hours filing more name claims, then embarked on a frantic, reckless drive, crisscrossing the entire state to every courthouse she could find, relentlessly trying to cajole or convince someone, anyone, to legally grant her the name Leonardo. She had barely slept a wink and, in her zealous pursuit, had spent all day without eating or drinking. The combination of severe sleep deprivation, dehydration, and the relentless summer heat proved catastrophic. She suffered a severe sunstroke before collapsing tragically on the courthouse steps. The fall was brutal. She landed straight onto her belly, and in that agonizing moment, she began to miscarry. She was rushed to the nearest hospital, where they had to administer IV fluids and nutrients, desperately trying to stabilize her. The moment she regained a semblance of lucidity, her first action was to call me directly from her hospital bed. Her voice was raw, laced with a fresh, searing agony, as she screamed, accusing me of killing her baby by forcing her to fight for what she vehemently believed was rightfully hers. "Lono was mine," she sobbed, her voice thick with pain and accusation. "How does it feel to know an innocent baby is dead because of you?" I simply hung up, unable to respond, a torrent of conflicting emotions warring within me. 3 weeks later, as I sat in the quiet comfort of our home, breastfeeding Leonardo, Samuel's phone rang, a jarring intrusion. It was Child Protective Services. Someone, undoubtedly Casey, had reported us for child abuse and neglect. The caseworker on the other end rattled off a list of allegations that made my blood run cold, chilling me to the bone. Samuel, my gentle, loving husband, was apparently violent towards the baby, they claimed. They cited his juvenile record, a lone incident from a bar fight when he was 17, a youthful indiscretion now weaponized against him. My own father, who lived with us and was a pillar of support, was also mentioned as a potential threat. They brought up an old teaching scandal, where a student had accused him of inappropriate behavior before later admitting she had lied, a painful memory dredged up from the past. They even had the audacity to mention our house, clean and baby-proofed, as being unsafe for a newborn. While we were still reeling, struggling to process the sheer audacity and maliciousness of the call, my neighbor texted me. Her phone screen was filled with screenshots from our local Facebook group. There, for all the world to see, was Casey's lengthy, self-aggrandizing post. She had painted herself as a brave hero, making the courageous decision to report the abuse she'd witnessed going on in our home, valiantly saving an innocent baby from danger. It was a sickening performance. 20 minutes later, feeling a desperate need to dispel this nightmare, I let the CPS workers into our home, convinced that seeing our clean, loving environment would immediately put an end to their investigation. The caseworker meticulously checked the nursery, scrutinized the baby supplies, and observed Leonardo sleeping peacefully in his crib. Everything was perfect, pristine. But then, she spotted my dad in the kitchen, casually making a cup of tea. "Is this the grandfather mentioned in the report?" she asked, her tone shifting noticeably. She pulled out her paperwork, her finger tracing a specific line. "The one with the teaching scandal," I explained frantically, my voice tinged with desperation, that the student had lied and later recanted her story. But it was too late. The caseworker's face had already hardened, her expression impassive. "With your husband's juvenile assault record in this report, we have to follow protocol," she stated, her words like a death knell. I'm sorry, the air felt impossibly heavy. I couldn't breathe. I watched, helpless, as the caseworker gently but firmly lifted my baby from his crib, carrying him out of our home. "He'll be with family," she assured me, though her words offered no comfort. "Your sister seems very prepared. She already had a nursery ready." Of course, she did. She had probably set it up the day after the baby shower, meticulously planning this moment. Our lawyer later informed us that emergency custody hearings, burdened by bureaucracy, could take time. While the subsequent investigation ultimately cleared us of all fabricated charges, bureaucracy, like a relentless tide, moved with agonizing slowness. In the agonizing interim, Casey, my sister, had our son, my baby. Her social media became a cruel highlight reel, Photos flaunted on Instagram, each caption a fresh wound, brazenly calling him my sweet Leonardo. It was a deliberate, public claiming. A painful narrative she was meticulously crafting. And there I was, trapped in a purgatory of my own home. The hum of the breast pump a constant, brutal soundtrack to my sorrow, expressing milk for a child I couldn't hold. A tiny life snatched from my arms. My gaze was fixed, yet unfocused. On my phone screen, the pixels blurring as I reread the caseworker's sterile, emotionless email for what felt like the 10th, 20th, 100th time. The investigation, it declared, was complete. They had found no concrete evidence of abuse, no tangible wrongdoing on our part. Yet the emergency custody order, that devastating piece of paper, would remain firmly in effect. Until when? Until the formal hearing. And that, the email vaguely hinted, could stretch for weeks, perhaps even months. How could I endure such an eternity, knowing that every moment was another stolen from my baby, while my sister, with chilling audacity, played house with him? A jarring ring shattered the silence, pulling me from the abyss of my thoughts. The doorbell. I dragged my weary body from the couch, each movement heavy with a grief that had settled deep in my bones. Still clad in the same milk-stained shirt from yesterday. A stark emblem of my disrupted reality, my neighbor stood on the porch, a casserole dish clutched in her hands, her eyes darting nervously around our quiet street as if anticipating unseen spies. I saw what happened, she whispered, her voice barely audible, laced with a mix of sympathy and fear. That woman who took your baby, Casey. She was here last week, asking rather peculiar questions about you. My heart pounded. I remembered her, dismissive at the time. I'd simply thought she was being a concerned aunt, just checking in. My hands, suddenly trembling uncontrollably, reached out to accept the dish, the ceramic surprisingly warm against my cold fingers. What kind of questions? I managed to ask, my voice a thin rasp. Oh, about your routines, she recounted, her unease palpable. When your husband gets home, if your dad helps with the baby. She even asked if I'd ever heard any arguing, any raised voices from your home. She shifted uncomfortably, a pang of regret visible in her eyes. I told her, of course, that you were wonderful parents. I'm so sorry. I had no idea she was. Gathering ammunition. The word hung in the air, a chilling premonition of the calculated attack she had meticulously planned. After she left, the heavy silence returned, now charged with a fresh current of dread. I called our lawyer again, the phone feeling heavy in my hand. His voice, measured and legalistic, laid out the cold, hard facts. In emergency custody situations, he explained, family placements were inherently prioritized. Since Casey had, with alarming foresight, prepared a full nursery complete with all the trimmings, no doubt, and successfully passed a home inspection, she was, in the eyes of the law, deemed a suitable caregiver. The fact that she had, with meticulous cutting, orchestrated this entire devastating charade. That, he stated with a sigh, simply didn't matter without irrefutable, tangible proof. Didn't matter without proof. How could something so clearly malicious, so undeniably engineered, be dismissed for lack of a paper trail, when the emotional devastation was so painfully real? Samuel came home early from work that day, his face drawn, etched with a fatigue that went beyond the physical. His boss had called him in, the professional facade cracking after seeing Casey's relentless, weaponized Facebook posts. Even though Samuel, with quiet dignity, had explained the convoluted, heartbreaking situation, the damage was already done, irreparable. People were whispering, their hushed tones carrying judgment and suspicion. His juvenile record, a youthful mistake from long ago that had never once mattered in our shared life, suddenly resurfaced, casting a dark, dangerous shadow over him in the harsh light of these fabricated allegations. That evening, Mom called, her voice strained, brittle, teetering on the edge of breaking. I went to see Casey, she began, her words heavy with sorrow. She has the baby dressed in all new clothes. Expensive, too. She's calling him Leonardo, of course. And she won't even let me hold him unless I call him that too. A fresh wave of nausea washed over me. Did she say anything about giving him back, Mom? I asked, my voice barely a whisper of hope. Mom paused, and then the words came, chillingly verbatim. She said, you should have just let her have the name. She kept repeating that this was meant to be. That losing her own baby was a sign, a cosmic decree that Leonardo was destined to be hers. Mom's voice finally cracked, a sound of profound grief. I don't recognize my own daughter anymore. It was a statement that echoed my own dawning, horrifying realization. I pumped milk again that night, the rhythmic whirring of the machine a cruel lullaby. My body, a vessel of maternal instinct, didn't understand that my baby was gone, that its purpose had been violently interrupted. Every 3 hours, with the relentless precision of a clockwork mechanism, I'd feel the agonizing letdown reflex, an undeniable biological imperative that demanded action. I had to pump, or risk the searing pain of mastitis, a cruel irony. Each session was pure torture, a physical, visceral reminder of what I'd lost, a torrent of life-giving sustenance with nowhere to go but a growing collection of freezer bags. The freezer, once a simple appliance, was rapidly becoming a chilling monument to his absence. The next morning, driven by a desperate need for control in a world that felt utterly chaotic, I decided to document everything. Every single detail, every fleeting interaction. I began to construct a meticulous timeline, starting from the innocent joy of the baby shower, meticulously recording every interaction, every veiled threat, every insidious, manipulative move Casey had ever made. Samuel, with quiet determination, helped me gather screenshots of her social media posts, especially the ones from before Leonardo was even born, where she had chillingly talked about her future baby, Leonardo. The foresight, the calculated premeditation, was horrifyingly clear. My dad, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, withdrawn into himself since the traumatic CPS visit, finally spoke up at dinner, his voice low and heavy. I keep thinking about that teaching scandal from years ago, he mused, pushing his food around his plate, his appetite clearly gone. Even though Sarah admitted she lied, it's still on my record, just like Samuel's bar fight. These things, they follow you forever. His gaze met mine, filled with a resigned weariness. Maybe I should move out temporarily. It might help your case, paint a picture of stability. Absolutely not, Samuel interjected firmly, his jaw set. We're not letting her tear this family apart. We did nothing wrong. But despite his fierce resolve, doubt, a cold insidious serpent, began to creep into my thoughts during the dark, lonely hours of the night. What if the caseworker was right to be concerned, even for a moment? What if our past mistakes, even those we'd long been cleared of, truly made us unfit parents in the eyes of the unforgiving world? I found myself mercilessly second-guessing every single parenting decision I had made in Leonardo's 3 short, precious weeks of life. On day 4 of this unbearable separation, an uncontrollable urge compelled me. I drove past Casey's apartment complex. I hadn't planned to stop, merely needing to feel a phantom proximity to my baby, a small comfort in the vast emptiness. But then, my heart lurched at her car wasn't there. A surge of panicked adrenaline shot through me. I immediately called Mom. Oh, yes, Mom said casually, and knowingly twisting the knife. She mentioned taking Leonardo to a baby yoga class this morning. She's really throwing herself into this aunt role. You know, Aunt Role. She's calling herself his aunt. The words hung in the air, mocking me. Aunt Ro, I repeated, my voice tight with disbelief, with dawning fury. She's calling herself his aunt. Well, what else would she call herself? The innocent question from Mom ignited a rage within me that was volcanic. A simmering lava of pure, unadulterated fury finally erupting. I drove straight to the baby yoga studio, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. Through the large front window, I saw her. There was Casey, brazenly holding my baby, surrounded by a circle of other blissful mothers, none of whom had any idea they were witnessing a kidnapping unfolding in slow motion. A public performance of stolen motherhood. Leonardo was fussing, a tiny, distressed whimper that tore at my heart. He was probably hungry. Did she even have formula? Was she, by some miracle, giving him the pumped milk I'd sent through Mom? Every maternal instinct screamed at me to burst in, to scream the truth, to reclaim my son. But I knew, with a chilling clarity, that such an emotional outburst would only hurt her already fragile case. So, instead, with trembling hands and a stone in my gut, I raised my phone and took photos through the window. Evidence, everything, from that moment on, was simply evidence. The lawyer called that afternoon, his voice a tightrope walked between hope and despair. We've got mixed news, he began. The good news is, we've secured a hearing date. 3 weeks from now, a flicker of relief, a fragile breath, but it was quickly extinguished. The bad news is that Casey has filed for temporary guardianship. My blood ran cold. Citing the ongoing investigation and your family's instability, of course. She can't do that, I whispered, the absurdity of it all overwhelming. She can try, he stated, his voice devoid of comfort. What truly drives someone, I wondered, to plan an entire kidnapping, a meticulous, devastating deception, all centered around a baby's name. Casey's timing, in retrospect, seemed far too perfect, too precisely calculated. The nursery already set up, a waiting trap. Her uncanny knowledge of courthouse procedures, her meticulous preparation of all the right documentation. She was now claiming I was mentally unstable due to postpartum depression. Inventing a cruel lie that I had hung up on her when she was miscarrying, a twisted fabrication designed to demonstrate a lack of empathy. She was, with cold, clinical precision, building a compelling case that she was the more suitable caregiver. The phone, a harbinger of relentless bad news, became too heavy. With a scream that was more animalistic than human, I hurled it across the room. It struck the nursery door, a hollow, echoing thud. That door, which had remained closed, a silent, painful sentinel ever since they had taken Leonardo. I hadn't been able to bring myself to go in there. His smell, that sweet, unique baby scent that made my arms ache with an unbearable emptiness, still lingered, a ghostly presence. Samuel found me an hour later, curled on the nursery floor, surrounded by piles of Leonardo's unworn clothes, tiny, pristine garments that now served as cruel symbols of a future denied. He pulled me against him, his arms a comforting anchor in my storm of grief. We're going to get him back, he said, his voice firm, unwavering. She can't keep this up forever. The truth will come out, but would it? Casey had always been the master manipulator in our family, the one who could shed tears on cue, crafting narratives and weaving webs of deceit with effortless grace. She operated with an almost chilling precision, always several steps ahead, leveraging every interaction and twisting any situation, no matter how innocuous, to her own sinister advantage. Even now, I could practically hear her voice, saccharine and feigned, spinning some elaborate, self-serving narrative about how she was bravely shielding Leonardo from some fabricated danger. Was there no limit to her theatrical deception? The relentless stress was a physical drain, manifesting most acutely in my body's betrayal. My milk supply, once abundant, was starting to dwindle, each drop feeling like a piece of my connection to him slipping away. A lactation consultant, bless her pragmatic soul, assured me it was a common physiological response when separated from an infant. Normal, she said. But what was normal about this waking nightmare? Still, I pumped with a desperate, almost religious fervor, the whirring of the machine of constant, mournful hum in the quiet house. It was a ritual of defiance, the only tangible act of mothering I could still perform for my son, a fragile lifeline tethering us together. Every other day, Mom, bless her weary heart, would embark on the heartbreaking errand of delivering the precious, dwindling supply of milk to Casey. I could almost picture the scene, Casey accepting it with an overt, performative gratitude that barely masked the real, undeniable smugness radiating from her. Her lips would curve into a practiced smile, but her eyes, I knew, would glitter with triumph. She's redecorating his nursery, Mom reported after one particularly grueling visit, her voice laced with unconcealed disapproval. Says the one you had wasn't stimulating enough for proper development, not stimulating enough. The words echoed, a fresh insult on an open wound. My nursery, lovingly crafted, now deemed inadequate by the self-proclaimed expert. Mom went on, detailing the lavish upgrades. She's bought all these garish, brightly colored educational toys, ones that flash and beat and overwhelm, and even hired a sleep consultant. As if mothering is a curriculum to be taught by strangers, the irony, sharp and bitter, seared through me like acid. Casey, who had deliberately conceived a child purely out of spite, a pregnancy tragically cut short by her own reckless abandon, was now parading as a benevolent super aunt, meticulously curating my baby's environment. She was, in essence, living out her twisted Leonardo DiCaprio fantasy with my Leonardo, the son I had named not for a movie star, but as a poignant tribute to my dearest best friend, now gone, who would never get to cradle him in her arms. Driven by a raw, unyielding desperation, I started making daily pilgrimages to the CPS office, each visit marked by a new offering, another meticulously gathered piece of evidence, another desperate plea for justice. Miss Patterson, our caseworker, was a portrait of weary professionalism. Her compassion was evident, yet she was visibly, profoundly overwhelmed, her desk a precarious mounting range of files, each thick binder representing a family teetering on the precipice of crisis. She would patiently, almost robotically, remind me that the initial investigation had indeed cleared us of any wrongdoing. However, she'd add, the ultimate, agonizing decision on custody rested solely with the family court judge. But what about the undeniable fact? I pressed, my voice tight with a frustration that bordered on hysteria, that my sister meticulously orchestrated this entire cruel charade. I must have asked it 100 times, each repetition sounding weaker than the last, for I lacked the irrefutable proof of her malicious intent. Miss Patterson would sigh, her gaze fixed somewhere beyond me. Without concrete evidence of malice, it's categorized as a good faith report. She'd explain her work a cold, bureaucratic bomb. She simply saw what she believed were warning signs and reported them. And she'd add a final crushing blow, the willingness of a family member to provide care during an investigation is actually considered a positive factor. I wanted to scream, to unleash a primal roar that would shatter the fragile peace of her office, to declare with every fiber of my being that there was nothing remotely positive about this soul-crushing nightmare. But I bit my tongue, the metallic tang of blood a stark reminder of the strategic silence required. An emotional outburst, I knew, would only serve as fresh ammunition for Casey's meticulously crafted postpartum depression narrative, further cementing her portrayal of me as unstable and unfit. 2 weeks into our agonizing separation, Samuel's professional life, once a pillar of stability, began to crumble. A particularly diligent client, doing their due diligence, had Googled him, unearthing Casey's venomous Facebook posts. Even though every single word was a deliberate fabrication, a tapestry of deceit, the damage to his hard-earned reputation was immediate and real. His boss, cloaking the inevitable in polite corporate euphemism, suggested he take some time off until the situation resolved itself, unpaid time off. A luxury we absolutely could not afford, especially with the relentless onslaught of legal bills mounting higher with each passing day. Dad, too, was weathering his own quiet storm. He'd returned to substitute teaching, a humble effort to help staunch the bleeding of our finances. But the insidious whispers about the CPS investigation had already spread like wildfire through the tight-knit community. Though he'd been completely exonerated years ago in an unrelated scandal, these fresh, baseless allegations dragged every painful memory back into the harsh light. The school district, with a chilling lack of ceremony, quietly and professionally removed him from their substitute list. Another casualty of Casey's vengeful campaign. Casey, meanwhile, was flourishing, blooming like some grotesque, poisonous flower. Her Instagram feed, a nauseating daily chronicle, showcased her Leonardo hitting every single milestone. His first fleeting smile, a precious moment I desperately yearned for. Stolen from me and documented for public consumption. The first wobbly effort to hold his head up, another milestone witnessed and curated by her. A brutal reminder of my absence. She'd even launched a saccharine mommy blog, brimming with platitudes about unexpected parenthood and the heartwarming narrative of when family steps up, this year. Unadulterated hypocrisy was a suffocating weight, pressing down on my chest until I could barely breathe. She wrote eloquent, impassioned posts about the profound importance of stable homes, all while actively, deliberately demolishing ours. She preached, with self-righteous fervor, about prioritizing children's well-being, yet she was knowingly, cruelly traumatizing an innocent infant by severing his fundamental bond with his mother. Every single like, every saccharine, supportive comment on her post felt like a fresh twist of a knife in my chest, a collective endorsement of her malicious fabrication. I printed everything. Every insidious post, every gushing comment, every photo where she, with brazen audacity, referred to him as my Leonardo. The stack of paper, physical manifestations of her digital cruelty, grew daily, a towering testament to her deceit. But would it be enough? The family court system, a lumbering behemoth of bureaucracy, moved at a glacial, agonizing pace, while my baby, my precious boy, grew and changed, hitting those precious, fleeting milestones without me there to witness them, to cherish them. Then, just 3 days before the long-awaited hearing, disaster struck with a cruel, almost theatrical timing. I had ventured out to the grocery store, a desperate attempt to cling to some semblance of normalcy, to perform the mundane acts of everyday life even as my world crumbled. When I returned, the sight that greeted me on our front porch froze my blood. Samuel stood there, rigid and pale, flanked by 2 uniformed police officers. My heart, a panicked bird, stopped mid-beat. There's been another report, he managed to choke out, his voice hollow, devoid of all hope. Someone called in a wellness check. Said they were concerned about my mental state, that I'd been making threats. The officers, though professional, were relentlessly thorough. They asked, their voices calm but probing, about weapons in our home, about my mental health history, about whether I had, indeed, threatened Casey. Of course, I hadn't, never. But someone had called, claiming to be a concerned neighbor, professing to have overheard violent threats. We knew, with a gut-wrenching certainty, that it was Casey, a new, insidious twist in her campaign, but proving it. That, as always, was another matter entirely. This wellness check, a carefully orchestrated act of psychological warfare, would now become part of the official record. Another black mark against us, another carefully placed piece in her meticulously constructed narrative that we were unstable, that we were dangerous. That night, the dam finally burst. The ugly, visceral cry that had been building for weeks, a seismic tremor beneath my carefully maintained composure, came pouring out. Samuel, my anchor, held me tight as I sobbed uncontrollably, the raw grief for missing Leonardo's first weeks, the agonizing ache in my arms that yearned to hold him, the crushing injustice of it all, erupting from me. She's winning, I gasped between ragged sobs, my voice barely a whisper. She's taking everything. No, Samuel countered, his voice firm, a stark contrast to my unraveling. He pulled me closer, his strength a steadying presence. She's desperate. Think about it. The wellness check, this relentless social media campaign, all of it. It's because she knows the hearing is imminent. She knows the truth, the real truth, is about to come out. But his conviction, powerful as it was, couldn't quite penetrate the thick fog of my despair. I wasn't so sure anymore. Truth, it seemed, was a delicate, ephemeral thing, easily shattered, especially when pitted against Casey's elaborate, meticulously woven web of lies. She had, with perverse genius, transformed our deepest love for our son into incriminating evidence against us, twisted our past, human mistakes into present, imagined dangers, and brazenly painted herself as the valiant hero in a story where she was, undeniably, the villain. The night before the hearing, sleep remained a cruel, elusive stranger. I found myself drawn, almost magnetically, to Leonardo's nursery, finally able to step across the threshold I'd avoided for so long. The air, heavy with unspoken promises, seemed to hum with his absence. I stood amidst the carefully chosen, now unused items, and promised him, with a fierce, unwavering resolve, that I would fight. Not with the venomous lies or the insidious manipulation that were Casey's preferred weapons, but with the undeniable power of truth, with the boundless strength of a mother's love, and with the fierce, primal determination of a woman who had been separated from her baby for far, far too long. Tomorrow, the battle to bring him home would begin. I just prayed, with every fiber of my being, that it would be enough. The morning of the hearing arrived, heralded by a churning, stomach-clenching concoction of hope and dread. I meticulously dressed myself in my most conservative, unassuming outfit, a sartorial attempt to project an air of calm stability, while Samuel, ever the nervous counterpart, adjusted his tie for what felt like the 5th time, his fingers fumbling with the silk. Dad, despite our heartfelt protests about how his presence might be perceived, about the whispers it might ignite, had insisted on coming. We arrived at the family services building a full hour early, a testament to our anxiety. The folder brimming with our painstakingly gathered evidence clutched so tightly in my trembling hands that my knuckles shone white. And there she was, Casey, already present in the sterile waiting area, impeccably composed, a tableau of carefully constructed serenity. Leonardo was nestled in a designer stroller, a stark contrast to the functional model I'd chosen for him. She had dressed him in an outfit I'd never seen before, a tiny, tailored ensemble, complete with miniature shoes he, a newborn, simply didn't need. My body, a loyal, visceral betrayer, reacted instantly to the sight of my son, a sudden, overwhelming letdown of milk, a stark, biological testament to our unbreakable bond, despite all my desperate, painful efforts to wean. My arms instinctively wrapped around my chest, a desperate, futile attempt to conceal the rapidly blossoming wet spots on my blood's telltale signs of the silent tears streaming down my face. Tears I prayed no one would notice. A crisp, authoritative voice broke the tense silence. The hearing officer beckoned us into a sterile, imposing conference room. Inside, the air was thick with unspoken tension. Mr. Patterson sat stiffly, his expression unreadable, flanked by Casey's familiar caseworker and a new supervisor, a woman whose stern demeanor I hadn't yet encountered. Casey, ever the consummate actress, didn't waste a moment. She immediately launched into her meticulously rehearsed performance, a masterclass in feigned distress. With trembling hands, she daintily dabbed at eyes that, suspiciously, remained perfectly dry, all while weaving a poignant narrative of exaggerated concerns about the supposed deficiencies of our home environment. Her evidence unfolded next, a curated collection of photos, each one meticulously chosen to depict Leonardo, vibrant and seemingly thriving under her attentive, almost impossibly perfect care. She produced an impressive stack of documentation detailing every single one of his doctor visits, alongside effusive, almost excessively glowing reports from the infant development specialist she had, of course, shrewdly hired for this very purpose. Finally, our moment arrived, a chance to cut through her fabricated reality. With hands that still trembled slightly but were now fortified by righteous anger, I methodically laid out our meticulously gathered evidence across the polished conference table. The first item was a stark, compelling timeline, meticulously tracking Casey's unsettling obsession with the name Leonardo, a fascination that, astonishingly, predated even our own son's conception by several years. It painted a chilling picture of premeditation. Next, a series of damning screenshots laid bare her deceit. Her ecstatic social media pregnancy announcement had conveniently appeared just days after she was documented visiting fertility clinics. A cruel irony suggesting a desperate, perhaps even fabricated, attempt at motherhood. But the most unequivocally damning piece was a text message retrieved from her own digital footprint, where she brazenly bragged to a friend about her brilliant scheme to acquire custody through a strategic barrage of fabricated CPS reports, a cold, calculated blueprint for theft. The new supervisor, her previous sternness now etched with genuine intrigue, meticulously scrutinized each document. Her questions, initially measured, soon became sharply pointed, piercing through Casey's carefully constructed facade. She pressed hard on the suspiciously precise timing of Casey's elaborate nursery preparations and her sudden, almost miraculous, acquisition of such comprehensive expertise in infant care. Then a flicker of something new, a subtle but profound shift. For the very first time, I witnessed a genuine shadow of doubt, a hint of unease, slowly creep into Mr. Patterson's usually impassive expression, a tiny victory in a sea of despair. Just as the tide seemed to be turning, Casey, with a theatrical flourish, deployed her ultimate weapon, her carefully concealed trump card. She dramatically presented a letter, supposedly from a reputable child psychologist, which gravely asserted that Leonardo had already developed profound signs of attachment to her, and that severing this burgeoning bond could inflict irreparable psychological harm upon the infant. The manipulative genius of it was sickening. As the hearing officer absorbed the contents of the letter, her own face, previously a mask of impartiality, visibly furrowed with genuine concern. A chilling confirmation of Casey's successful manipulation. The meeting, a crucible of emotions, dissolved without any immediate resolution. They declared a need for more time to painstakingly review every shred of evidence, to consult with an array of additional, independent experts. Another 2 weeks minimum, they stated, a pronouncement that felt like a life sentence, extending our agony indefinitely before any semblance of a decision could possibly be reached. I stumbled out of that cold, sterile building, my very core feeling utterly hollowed out, a vacant shell. My eyes blurred with tears, fixated on Casey, who, with a triumphant smirk, wheeled my son away, cooing at him with a sickeningly possessive air, as if he had always and irrevocably been hers, a grotesque charade playing out before my shattered gaze. Later that desolate afternoon, amidst the oppressive quiet of our grief-stricken home, a gentle but insistent knock echoed through the silence. It was Mrs. Doherty, our sweet, elderly neighbor, her usually steady hands trembling noticeably as she clutched a thick, worn manila envelope, her eyes wide with a mixture of apprehension and urgent resolve. Inside, a treasure trove of unexpected, invaluable evidence awaited us, a series of photographs, meticulously captured by Mrs. Doherty's watchful eye. These images depicted Casey, not just once, but repeatedly, prowling around our house in the tense weeks leading up to Leonardo's birth, always, chillingly, when we were absent. In several particularly unnerving shots, Casey was caught in the act, obliquely photographing our property, her face pressed eerily against our windows, peering intently into our private spaces, a predatory reconnaissance mission in plain sight. But Mrs. Doherty's vigilance extended far beyond mere photographs. Troubled by Casey's increasingly peculiar and unsettling behavior, she had, with remarkable foresight, maintained an incredibly detailed log. This meticulous record meticulously documented dates, precise times, and vivid descriptions of Casey's intrusive interrogations of our other neighbors, probing questions about our daily schedules, our most intimate habits, even the seemingly innocuous detail of which pediatrician we had chosen for our unborn child. It became horrifyingly clear, Casey hadn't just reacted. She had been relentlessly, systematically building her insidious case against us for months, a grand, calculated deception. Without a moment's hesitation, we immediately dispatched this explosive new evidence to our lawyer, who, recognizing its immense import, swiftly forwarded it directly to the Family Services Supervisor, hoping to finally dismantle Casey's narrative. However, Casey, it seemed, possessed an unnerving network of informants deep within the very system we trusted. Just 2 days later, with an audacious speed that confirmed our fears, she dramatically escalated her campaign of psychological warfare. I was simply trying to navigate the mundane aisles of the grocery store, lost in thought, when my phone suddenly vibrated violently, then exploded with a relentless barrage of notifications, each one a sharp jab to my already frayed nerves. Casey had gone live on social media, her face bathed in the harsh, unflattering glow of a smartphone, strategically positioned in what appeared to be a sterile hospital waiting room. Her voice, choked with theatrical sobs, broadcasted a litany of horrifying accusations. I, the birth mother, was allegedly stalking her, brazenly showing up at Leonardo's meticulously chosen activities, and issuing grave, unspecified threats against her safety and well-being. With a dramatic flourish, she brandished a printed restraining order application, her eyes brimming with what looked like genuine tears, though I knew better, as she tearfully articulated her fabricated terror for Leonardo's safety, painting me as a clear and present danger. The video, a masterstroke of emotional manipulation, exploded across our local community, going viral in a matter of hours. Those who were oblivious to the agonizing complexities of our full story saw only a picture of raw heroism, a devoted, self-sacrificing caregiver valiantly protecting an innocent, vulnerable baby from the perceived instability and menace of its birth mother. A single, devastating narrative took hold. A torrent of venomous comments inundated the feed, an overwhelming wave of vitriol. Strangers, fueled by Casey's twisted narrative, poured out their support for her, unequivocally branding me as dangerous, suggesting, with casual cruelty, that I was desperately in need of psychiatric intervention. Some even went so far as to laud Casey as a true hero, commending her for stepping up where, they implied, family had failed a sickening betrayal. It was Samuel who found me, moments later, hunched over the steering wheel in the grocery store parking lot, gasping for air, hyperventilating uncontrollably in my car, engulfed by a crushing wave of despair and rage. He had rushed from work, his face pale and strained immediately after seeing the devastating video. Together, we forced ourselves to rewatch Casey's sickening spectacle, dissecting every frame, every nuance. We meticulously noted the calculated pauses in her speech, the precisely timed tears that welled up on cue, the subtle shifts in her gaze, a chilling testament to her meticulous planning and theatrical genius. It was a cold, clinical deconstruction of a performance designed to destroy us. This wasn't a misunderstanding, it was a deliberate strategy. Casey, we realized with a sickening lurch, was playing a ruthless game of grandmother chess, while everyone else, ourselves included, had naively assumed we were merely sitting down to a casual family dinner. The sheer audacity of it all was breathtaking. To hire an army of sleep consultants for a baby she had, by all accounts, effectively stolen. All while churning out saccharine blog posts about the joys of unexpected parenthood. This required a special, chilling kind of nerve. A level of brazen manipulation that would undoubtedly make even the most seasoned reality TV villains furiously take notes. In a final, cynical stroke, she had even carefully positioned Leonardo within the frame, a prop in her elaborate charade, utterly oblivious and peacefully sleeping through her entire calculated theatrics, an innocent pawn in her cruel game. Within the hour, our lawyer's voice, grave and weary, finally reached us, cutting through the suffocating gloom. The restraining order application, she confirmed, was indeed real, a tangible legal threat. Yet upon closer examination, it was laughably flimsy, built on a foundation of transparent lies and distortions. Casey had grotesquely twisted my solitary, innocent presence at a baby yoga studio place I'd gone to find some semblance of peace into a malicious act of stalking, preposterously claiming I had been relentlessly following her for weeks on end, a ludicrous accusation. To bolster her false narrative, she had submitted grainy, deceptively cropped photos of me driving past her apartment complex, conveniently omitting the crucial, undeniable detail that her building was situated directly on my routine, unavoidable route to the grocery store. A calculated omission, designed to paint me as a menace. Thankfully, the temporary restraining order was denied, a small flicker of justice. However, the insidious damage had already been irrevocably done. The whispers, the judgment, the insidious doubt now festered within our community. A poison seed planted by Casey's viral performance. The family services supervisor, her tone heavy with a new layer of worrying, called us shortly after, not to offer solace, but to express profound concern about the rapidly escalating, increasingly volatile situation. She issued a stark warning. Any aggressive behavior from our end, even the slightest perceived instance of anger or retaliation, could catastrophically jeopardize our already precarious case. We found ourselves ensnared in an agonizing, impossible dilemma. Fiercely battling for our son's return meant risking the appearance of instability, of being unfit, if we dared to fight too hard, too visibly. It was a suffocating trap. In a surprising and profoundly welcome turn of events, Mom, who had until now maintained a careful, almost agonizing neutrality in an effort to preserve her precious access to Leonardo, suddenly transformed into our fiercest, most unexpected ally. Casey's latest, outrageous social media stunt had pushed her, decisively, over the edge. With a newfound resolve, Mom began meticulously documenting every single detail during her supervised visits, subtly deploying her phone to secretly capture Casey's unguarded, authentic moments, stripping away the carefully curated facade. She became our eyes and ears inside Casey's false reality. What Mom uncovered was not just concerning, but profoundly disturbing. It revealed a calculated, almost insidious campaign by Casey to systematically erase our very existence from Leonardo's nascent memory, severing any connection to his true origins. She had designed and decorated a nursery that bore absolutely no resemblance to the one we had lovingly prepared for our son, instead filling it to the brim with bizarre, almost obsessive, Leonardo DiCaprio memorabilia, a shrine to an actor, not a space for a baby. It was a stark, unsettling symbol of her fabricated reality. Casey not only consistently referred to herself as Mama in Leonardo's presence, but had also, astonishingly, instructed the daycare workers to believe and perpetuate the lie that she was, unequivocally, his biological mother. When Mom, in a moment of brave defiance, attempted to gently correct this egregious untruth, Casey erupted into a terrifying, unbridled rage, immediately threatening to sever all future visits, a chilling glimpse into her manipulative control. Beyond the psychological manipulation, Mom also observed a litany of glaring practical problems. It became glaringly apparent that Casey was utterly overwhelmed, completely unprepared for, and deeply unsuited to the demanding, relentless, actual work involved in caring for a fragile infant. Her charade extended only so far. To compensate for her profound inadequacy, Casey had assembled an entire retinue of hired help, a dedicated night nanny, a separate day nanny, and a revolving door of various specialists brought in to handle every single aspect of infant care, from routine feeding schedules to basic diaper changes. When, on rare occasions, Casey was left alone with Leonardo for even the briefest periods, she would descend into an almost frantic panic, immediately dialing Mom, desperate for assistance with the most basic, fundamental tasks. The most egregious incident occurred during one particular visit when Mom discovered Leonardo suffering from a severe, painfully raw diaper rash, a condition that had, unequivocally, been festering and developing for several days. Casey, in her detached, absentee motherhood, hadn't even noticed, precisely because she so rarely bothered to change him herself. Mom, with a mother's swift resolve, meticulously documented the horrific neglect with indisputable photos and immediately rushed Leonardo to urgent care, where the attending physician, recognizing the undeniable signs of prolonged neglect, carefully documented it all within his official medical records, a damning indictment of Casey's care. We submitted this avalanche of compelling new evidence, a beacon of hope in our despair. Yet, the legal and social services system, like some ancient, lumbering beast, moved with an agonizing, maddening slowness, each passing day stretching our ordeal into an unbearable eternity. Every single tick of the clock was another precious, irreplaceable day of Leonardo's rapidly unfolding life that I was cruelly forced to miss, another milestone stolen. He was 3 months old now, a vibrant, developing infant, and I, his true mother, had been allowed to actively parent him for a mere, heartbreaking total of exactly 3 weeks of stark, agonizing imbalance. Concurrently, the relentless financial pressure mounted, a suffocating weight on our already fragile existence. Samuel's unpaid leave, once a temporary sacrifice, tragically morphed into a devastating layoff, his company deciding that the ongoing, highly public controversy surrounding our case was simply too much of a liability. Dad's supplementary income from substitute teaching, a crucial lifeline, vanished. We were relentlessly burning through our rapidly dwindling life savings, pouring every last cent into exorbitant legal fees, while Casey, with sickening indifference, brazenly continued to post on social media about her lavish, expensive baby classes and an endless parade of designer outfits for her son. The contrast was a cruel, infuriating slap in the face. Just when the darkness seemed impenetrable, a small, unexpected crack appeared in the wall of despair, a glimmer of light. An unexpected, potentially seismic break emerged. Casey's night nanny, a woman named Victoria, cautiously reached out to us, making contact through Mom. Her voice laced with trepidation, but also a nascent resolve. Victoria confessed that she had grown increasingly, profoundly uncomfortable with the entire disturbing situation. Her unease escalating sharply once the truth had dawned on her, the undeniable, agonizing realization that Leonardo was not, in fact, Casey's biological baby. With remarkable foresight and quiet courage, she had begun keeping meticulous, detailed notes, documenting every suspicious observation, every unsettling conversation, every piece of evidence that chipped away at Casey's elaborate facade, becoming an invaluable, unwitting witness against the charade she was unwittingly supporting. Casey's behavior spiraled, punctuated by jarring, middle-of-the-night rants that echoed through the otherwise quiet hours. Her voice, sharp and self-righteous, would declare with unnerving conviction how she, undeniably, deserved Leonardo far more than I ever could. It was amidst this escalating torment that Victoria, our former nanny, bravely stepped forward, her conscience overriding her fear. What she unveiled was nothing short of a meticulously crafted conspiracy, a chilling testament to Casey's premeditation. This wasn't a sudden, impulsive act. Casey had been orchestrating this insidious plan long before the first flutter of her own pregnancy. She delved deep into the labyrinthine corridors of custody laws, not just skimming articles, but absorbing every nuance, every potential loophole. Under thinly veiled pretexts, she shrewdly consulted with family lawyers, extracting strategic advice on parental rights and legal claims, all while presenting a facade of concern for a fictional friend. Her dedication even extended to attending foster parent training sessions, meticulously dissecting the intricate workings of the system, understanding its vulnerabilities and strengths, much like a predator studying its prey. Her subsequent pregnancy, Victoria revealed, had been a calculated maneuver, a biological ace meant to solidify her claim to a child, any child. But when fate cruelly snatched her own baby away, her objective didn't waver. Instead, with cold, dispassionate efficiency, she simply pivoted, her sights now firmly fixed on mine. We arranged a clandestine meeting with Victoria at a hushed corner coffee shop, the air thick with unspoken tension. Her hands, trembling slightly, pressed a stack of photocopied notes into my own, each page a potential lifeline in our drowning despair. You could see the internal struggle etched on her face, the palpable terror of losing her nanny license, her very livelihood, should Casey ever discover her betrayal. Yet, the weight of her conscience, a silent, insistent drumbeat, simply wouldn't permit her to remain silent any longer. She painted a disturbing picture of Casey, describing in vivid detail incidents where she would practice her concern and performance in front of a mirror, her reflection a silent audience to the chilling rehearsals. She'd articulate and refine specific lines, perfecting her tone of feigned empathy and fabricated alarm, all designed for their inevitable delivery to Child Protective Services. This damning testimony, coupled with her meticulous notes, swayed the CPS supervisor, who, after listening intently, agreed to an emergency review of Leonardo's case. A glimmer of hope, however fragile, pierced through our dark reality. But alas, when the designated meeting day arrived, a day we had clung to with desperate anticipation, Victoria was nowhere to be found. She had vanished, seemingly into thin air, leaving behind only a terse text message to my mom, a stark declaration that she couldn't risk her career. The sudden, inexplicable void she left was devastating. Without her direct, live testimony, her meticulously gathered notes, once so promising, were legally reduced to mere hearsay, easily dismissed. It was a crushing blow, leaving us feeling utterly exposed and vulnerable. Casey, with an almost uncanny intuition, knew the moment our fragile alliance with Victoria had crumbled, that we had, for a fleeting moment, graced her weakness. Her response was swift, ruthless, and perfectly calibrated. Within days, a new night nanny was installed, a fresh face to replace the inconvenient truth-teller. Simultaneously, her social media feeds, already a weaponized platform, exploded with posts detailing the instability and false allegations of her former employee. She masterfully spun a narrative of victimhood, presenting herself as the long-suffering target of a disgruntled, emotionally volatile individual. The public, ever eager for drama, swallowed it whole, showering her with an outpouring of sympathy that only swelled her already burgeoning social media following. The smear campaign, now fully unleashed, intensified with terrifying momentum. Casey then escalated her psychological warfare by launching a flag, ironically named Protecting Leonardo. It was here, in this deceptively benign online space, that she meticulously documented her twisted version of events. The insidious tendrils of Casey's campaign began to choke our lives. People who had known us for years, friends and acquaintances who had shared laughter and milestones, began to avoid us, their gazes shifting, their smiles faltering, and sure of what twisted version of the truth to believe. The weight of their uncertainty was crushing. For me, the constant fear and public scrutiny culminated in crippling panic attacks, my breath catching in my throat, my heart hammering against my ribs. Simple errands, like a trip to the grocery store, transformed into a minefield of judging looks and hushed, venomous whispers that followed me through the aisles. Samuel, once a respected professional, found his career prospects evaporating. Every potential employer, a quick Google search away, inevitably stumbled upon Casey's meticulously crafted defamatory posts, slamming doors shut on his future. My dad, once the unwavering pillar of our family, retreated into the shadows of his own making, spending days cloistered in his room. A desperate attempt to avoid inadvertently making things worse for us. Our lawyer, seeing the relentless legal and emotional siege, suggested mediation, a desperate hope that perhaps, in a neutral room with an impartial third party, we could finally negotiate a semblance of sanity. But Casey, ever the orchestrator of chaos, refused, her denial couched in a ludicrous claim that she feared for her safety if she were to meet us. To further muddy the waters and prolong our agony, she filed yet another baseless report, alleging that we had been driving by her apartment at night. This was an impossible accusation to disprove, as one cannot account for every fleeting moment of existence. The ensuing investigation into this fabricated claim meant more agonizing delays, more precious weeks slipping away, weeks of Leonardo growing and changing without us. Each passing day afresh cut to our hearts. My mom, bless her tireless heart, would relay fragments of Leonardo's burgeoning life, whispered reports from her clandestine visits. He'd started solid foods, exploring new textures with innocent curiosity. He was sitting up on his own, a small victory of independent movement. He'd even discovered his feet, marveling at these tiny, new appendages. These were all sacred milestones, moments that I, his mother, should have borne witness to, but instead experienced secondhand, filtered through the grainy, illicit photos my mom secretly snapped on her phone. Each image was a bittersweet pang, a reminder of the stolen time. Then, one evening, a faint beacon of hope flickered. Samuel's cousin called, her voice tinged with both surprise and urgency, recounting a strange story. She'd been at a baby store, innocently browsing, when she overheard Casey talking animatedly to another woman, the topic, adoption lawyers. Casey, with chilling casualness, was openly inquiring about the intricate process of adopting a child already in your care, dissecting how long it typically took, and what rights birth parents miraculously retained after the fact. Resourceful and quick-thinking, the cousin managed to record a crucial segment of their conversation on her phone. This was it, we thought, the irrefutable evidence, the smoking gun we desperately needed to expose Casey's true, predatory intentions. This wasn't just about temporary caregiving until the system sorted itself out. No, this was about a calculated, deliberate attempt to permanently, irrevocably steal our son. But our fragile hope was once again dashed, slamming into another insurmountable wall when we submitted the recording. The audio, maddeningly, was too muffled, too indistinct to be conclusively clear. Casey, ever quick with a plausible lie, smoothly countered that she had merely been asking for a friend who was supposedly in a similar situation, the supervisor. Visibly frustrated by the endless legal wrangling, scheduled yet another hearing, but delivered a stark warning. This might very well be our last, best chance to resolve things before long term. Potentially irreversible custody decisions were etched in stone. We plunged back into a grueling cycle of sleepless nights, fueled by potent coffee and raw desperation, meticulously organizing every scrap of evidence, endlessly practicing what we would say, how we would articulate our truth. Yet, a cold, heavy dread settled deep in my bones, an unshakable feeling that we were trapped in a rigged game, a cruel charade where Casey, our invisible puppet master, kept arbitrarily changing the rules, ensuring we could never truly win. A mere week before that critical hearing, disaster, with its cruel and familiar timing, struck again. A fresh wound tearing open our barely healing scars. My dad, seeking a momentary respite from the crushing pressure, had gone for a walk to clear his head in the local park. There, he encountered one of Casey's operatives, a woman who, with insidious intent, immediately began recording him. Her questions, delivered with a syrupy, sweet but undeniably provocative tone, immediately steered towards the long-buried specter of an old teaching scandal, designed to ignite a volatile reaction. Dad, sensing the trap, tried to disengage, to simply walk away, but she shadowed him relentlessly, her aggression escalating with every deliberate step. When he finally, understandably, raised his voice, a raw cry of frustration telling her to stop, she had precisely what she wanted, video footage of him, a seemingly aggressive man, yelling at a woman in a public park. The expertly edited clip, a masterclass in manipulative storytelling, flooded social media within hours. It portrayed my dad as a volatile aggressor, while the woman, a consummate actress, appeared to cower away in fear. Casey, quick to pounce, reshared it with venomous commentary about patterns of violence in our household. How she was bravely trying to protect Leonardo from this toxic environment. The post went virally local, sparking outrage and calls for criminal charges against my father. We immediately hired a digital forensics expert who conclusively proved the video was doctored, a patchwork of manipulated moments, but the agonizing truth, as always, spread far slower than the devastating lie, leaving my dad's reputation in tatters. He was utterly devastated, his spirit visibly breaking under the unbearable weight of public humiliation, even discussing the desperate possibility of leaving the state entirely. Believing his presence was only hurting our case, we pleaded with him to stay, our voices hoarse with desperation. But the raw anguish in his eyes revealed a soul fracturing under the relentless assault. It was Samuel who made another chilling discovery. Casey had seamlessly integrated herself into several online groups for adoptive parents. There, she presented herself as a compassionate, empathetic individual navigating the foster-to-adopt process, sharing carefully curated photos of Leonardo with saccharine captions about their journey together and the challenges of dealing with birth family issues. These well-meaning group members, blissfully unaware they were being manipulated, offered unwavering support and advice, unknowingly enabling what was, at its very core, a kidnapping. Then, just 3 days before the hearing, my mom, with a mixture of audacious courage and desperate resolve, made her own risky, calculated move. With a deceptively casual demeanor, she convinced Casey to allow her to babysit Leonardo, claiming Casey needed to be free to attend a very important meeting. The trap was set. Once alone with our precious boy, Mom, her heart pounding, drove him straight to our house. For 3 agonizingly precious hours, I held my son again, a reunion that felt both miraculously impossible and utterly, heartbreakingly real. He had changed so much in his absence. The soft, newborn roundness of his face had given way to more defined features. His eyes, once unfocused, now tracked movement with curious intent. But when I cradled him against my chest, he settled in, a deep, comforting sigh escaping his tiny lips, as if his infant memory, a primal connection, still recognized the rhythm of my heartbeat. I fed him a bottle of formula, my own milk supply having agonizingly dried up during our separation, changed his diaper with hands that trembled slightly, and sang the lullabies I had planned and rehearsed countless times during my pregnancy. Samuel, meanwhile, moved with a frantic, silent urgency, capturing hundreds of photos and videos, each click and whore a desperate piece of evidence, irrefutable proof that we were capable. Loving parents. When Mom, her own eyes brimming with tears, finally had to take him back, I truly thought my heart would shatter, splintering into a million irreparable pieces. But those 3 hours, stolen from the jaws of despair, had given me something I desperately needed. A profound, visceral reconnection, a potent shot of hope, and the undeniable, burning strength to continue fighting for his rightful return. Lost, utterly, irrevocably lost, yet a profound certainty anchored me. Leonardo knew me. Despite the agonizing months of separation, the chasm that had opened between us, he remained, undeniably, my baby. Casey could meticulously dress him in elaborate outfits, parading him around like a prized possession, but such superficial displays could never, not for a single moment, erase the indelible bond we had forged during those tender, transformative first 3 weeks of his life. Mom recounted, her voice laced with a mix of anger and relief, that Casey had been absolutely furious about my unauthorized visit, a desperate, clandestine attempt to simply see my son. Her wrath had reportedly escalated to threats of cutting off all access entirely, a cruel psychological weapon she wielded with chilling expertise. However, the bitter irony was that Casey desperately needed Mom's unwavering assistance too much to ever truly follow through on such a drastic, self-sabotaging ultimatum. The grim reality was that Leonardo's nanny situation had devolved into a perpetual revolving door, a disheartening procession of caregivers who, one after another, realized with growing unease that something was profoundly off about the entire, unsettling arrangement. They were, in essence, fleeing a situation that felt fundamentally wrong, ethically and morally. Consequently, Mom, with her steadfast presence and quiet strength, became the only true, stable anchor in Leonardo's tumultuous young life. The morning before the long-awaited, dread-filled hearing, our lawyer's call shattered the fragile peace of the pre-dawn hours, delivering profoundly disturbing news. Casey, in a ruthless display of preemptive aggression, had submitted a thick, imposing folder brimming with what she claimed was new evidence. This insidious collection included meticulously crafted statements from a host of individuals we had never even heard of. Shadowy figures who conveniently claimed to have witnessed concerning behavior from us, vague, insidious accusations designed to sow doubt and discredit. She had gone so far as to hire a private investigator, a silent, predatory observer who had diligently photographed us at our absolute worst, most vulnerable moments. I recalled the searing humiliation of being caught, utterly and then crying uncontrollably in the car. Samuel's face contorted with justified rage after stumbling upon one of Casey's venomous online posts. Dad, a solitary, bad figure, walking alone, the crushing weight of depression visibly etched upon him. Every raw, deeply human moment of struggle, every lapse into despair, had been meticulously documented, coldly calculated, and then cynically weaponized against us. The investigator's report, a masterpiece of manipulative distortion, meticulously painted a chilling, utterly false picture of an unstable, dysfunctional family unit, supposedly incapable of providing adequate care for a child. How utterly perverse it was that our instability was, in fact, a direct, agonizing consequence of having our child cruelly, premeditatedly stolen from us. A nagging, unsettling question continued to haunt me. A piece of the puzzle that refused to fit. What was truly off about Victoria's inexplicably swift disappearance after she had so eagerly offered to help? She possessed incredibly detailed notes, damning evidence of Casey meticulously rehearsing her fabricated performance in front of mirrors, perfecting her deceitful narrative. Yet, when her testimony mattered most, when the stakes were highest, she had suddenly, inexplicably, fled town. Was it fear, coercion, or something far more sinister? In Casey's carefully constructed, self-serving narrative, we had, conveniently, always been unfit, a preordained truth that justified her every heinous action. I spent that final, interminable night before the hearing cocoon in Leonardo's nursery, a sacred space now transformed into a heartbreaking monument to what might have been. I was surrounded by a silent, poignant array of clothes he would never wear and toys he would never play with. The room, once vibrant with anticipation, now smelled musty, abandoned, a suffocating shroud of unspoken grief. I reached for the soft, stuffed elephant, a thoughtful gift from my best friend's mother who had rejoiced at the news of his birth, and clutched it tightly. A vivid memory surfaced, the joy with which I had planned to tell Leonardo about the beloved friend he was named for, a story now cruelly suspended. Samuel found me there at dawn, still awake, the first slivers of light timidly creeping through the window. He didn't speak, but simply wrapped his arms around me, a silent, powerful embrace of shared fear and unwavering support. Neither of us dared to voice the terrifying anxieties that gnawed at us for the day ahead. They hung in the air, heavy and unspoken. We had poured every ounce of our being into preparing, exhausting every possible avenue. But Casey, through her relentless, calculating action, had proven beyond doubt that she would stop at absolutely nothing, would cross any line to keep our son. As we dressed, mechanically preparing for the impending confrontation, my mind reeled through the preceding 5 months of veritable eternity of living hell. I traced the insidious trajectory of how a sister's venomous jealousy, ignited by something as seemingly innocuous as a name, had spiraled catastrophically out of control, culminating in the unfathomable loss of my child, the devastation of our livelihoods, and the cruel shredding of our reputations. How the very system ostensibly designed and meant to protect innocent children had been perversely twisted, transforming into a potent, destructive weapon wielded against us. How, in this distorted reality, raw and varnished truth seemed utterly powerless, utterly impotent, against a meticulously crafted, strategically deployed lie. Yet, amidst this torrent of despair, my thoughts inevitably gravitated back to those 3 precious, stolen hours with Leonardo, the profound comfort of his tiny hand gripping my finger with surprising strength, the soft, contented sighs he made while sleeping, a sound of pure innocence. He was, I fiercely reminded myself, absolutely worth fighting for, worth enduring any conceivable humiliation, any unimaginable hardship. I was his mother, his protector, and I vowed, with every fiber of my being, that I would never, ever cease fighting to bring him home. We arrived at the imposing family services building, its bland, institutional facade doing little to mask the high-stakes drama unfolding within. There, already waiting with an almost theatrical air of triumph, was Casey, encircled by a fervent cohort of supporters meticulously gathered from her online community. She had shamelessly transformed our deeply personal, profoundly agonizing custody hearing into a grotesque public spectacle, complete with matching t-shirts brazenly emblazoned with the ironically sickening slogan, Team Leonardo's safety. My stomach churned, a knot of revulsion tightening with each beat of my heart. at the sheer audacity of her performance, but I forced my gaze forward, keeping my head held high, refusing to give her the satisfaction of a visible reaction as we walked past their impassioned, yet utterly misguided, throng. Inside the sterile conference room, the supervisor, a woman whose every line seemed etched with the weight of difficult decisions, had meticulously arranged seating around a large, formidable table. Patterson was there, a familiar presence, alongside Casey's caseworker, our diligent lawyer, and several other stern-faced officials whose identities remained unknown to me. In the dead center of the table, an impossibly large, imposing stack of evidence loomed, a physical manifestation of the sheer volume of material amassed. Months of our lives, our joys, our sorrows, our private moments, brutally reduced to mere paper and photographs. Then Casey entered, making her grand entrance, Leonardo nestled snugly in a carrier, a prop in her meticulously staged drama. She exaggeratedly fussed over him, constantly checking on him with an ostentatious display of maternal concern. He was dressed, of course, in an outfit covered in little Oscar statues, a nauseating, chilling reminder of her deeply disturbing, long-standing obsession with Leonardo DiCaprio. I clenched my jaw, forcing every muscle in my face into a mask of placid neutrality, knowing, with absolute certainty, that even the slightest flicker of emotion would be ruthlessly seized upon and wielded as a weapon against me. The supervisor, her expression unyielding and grave, called the meeting to order. She began, her voice a calm, measured monotone, explaining that this pivotal hearing would unequivocally determine Leonardo's future custody arrangements, emphasizing that all submitted evidence had been meticulously reviewed, and that the best interests of Leonardo were the sole, paramount consideration. Every fiber of my being screamed, longed to erupt in a furious, heart-wrenching protest. His best interests are being with his parents, but I bit down hard on my tongue, tasting the bitter tang of blood, my silence a raw, agonizing sacrifice. What followed was a systematic, almost chillingly precise presentation of evidence from both sides. Casey's legal team, rehearsed and polished, went first, laying out their case with practiced, almost theatrical precision. The damning photographs, the fabricated reports, the carefully curated witness statements, each piece methodically designed, all culminating in a meticulously crafted narrative painting us as utterly unfit parents. They skillfully emphasized Samuel's juvenile record, a past indiscretion resurrected and magnified, Dad's decades-old teaching scandal, a smear designed to question his character, and my mental instability, a cruel twisting of my grief and trauma following the separation. Every fragile, vulnerable moment of human frailty, every legitimate struggle, was ruthlessly magnified, distorted into undeniable proof of profound dysfunction. Then, finally, came our turn. Our lawyer, with calm, methodical precision, began to dismantle Casey's painstakingly constructed narrative, piece by agonizing piece. He meticulously laid bare the sinister timeline of her obsession, revealing the chillingly calculated nature of her reports, and presenting irrefutable evidence of a deeply disturbing plan that predated Leonardo's very birth. Mrs. Dort's photos, chillingly precise, vividly exposed Casey's relentless, invasive surveillance. Mom's detailed documentation, compiled with painstaking accuracy, starkly revealed the grim reality of Casey's neglectful, chaotic caregiving. And the meticulous digital forensics, a triumph of technological truth, unequivocally exposed the doctor, edited videos, and the shockingly manufactured evidence Casey had so desperately tried to pass off as legitimate. As the damning evidence inexorably mounted, I watched, with a grim sense of satisfaction, as Casey's carefully composed mask, her facade of righteous indignation, slowly, perceptibly began to crack, fissures appearing in her self-assured veneer. Her avid supporters, isolated from the proceedings, remained blissfully ignorant of the devastating revelation, but Casey herself could hear every damning word, every shred of irrefutable proof. When our lawyer projected texts onto the screen, messages where she had brazenly bragged about her perverse plan to steal Leonardo, a deep, furious flush crept up her neck, staining her face a telltale crimson. When Mom's poignant, heartbreaking recordings of Casey referring to herself as Mama played, Casey shifted uncomfortably, squirming in her seat, her composure visibly unraveling. The supervisor, her expression now hardened, began to interject with pointed, incisive questions, her tone no longer accepting superficial, evasive explanations. She demanded answers. Why had Casey meticulously prepared a nursery before ever reporting any abuse? Why had she consulted with adoption lawyers while simultaneously claiming to be merely a temporary caregiver? Why had multiple nannies, one after another, quit in rapid succession, explicitly citing grave ethical concerns? Each piercing question, delivered with an almost surgical precision, chipped away relentlessly at the meticulously constructed hero narrative Casey had so desperately tried to weave around herself. Then came the moment, sudden and seismic, that irrevocably changed everything. The supervisor, her voice now ringing with an undeniable authority, produced a document we had never seen before, its unexpected appearance sending a ripple of disbelief through our small group. CPS, it was revealed, had conducted their own independent investigation, initiated after receiving our extensive, compelling evidence. This comprehensive inquiry had included exhaustive interviews with former nannies, whose collective testimonies painted a harrowing picture, and a painstaking review of Casey's social media history, painstakingly traced back years. The investigation uncovered posts from 5 years ago where Casey, with chilling prescience, had explicitly discussed naming her future son Leonardo, complete with meticulously detailed nursery plans that were eerily, identically matched to the nursery she had, chillingly, created for our son. Even more damning, more utterly incriminating, was their shocking discovery that Casey had been in frantic, desperate contact with multiple fertility clinics in the agonizing weeks between our baby shower and her sudden, dubious pregnancy announcement. She had undergone a series of emergency IUI treatments, maxing out credit cards in a frenzied, desperate attempt to get pregnant as quickly as possible. The meticulously reconstructed timeline laid bare for all to see, proof beyond any shadow of a doubt that she had deliberately, calculatingly gotten pregnant specifically to claim the name Leonardo. The supervisor's voice, now stern, resolute, and dripping with thinly veiled contempt, cut through the stunned silence as she addressed Casey directly, her words of final, inescapable judgment. The investigation had unequivocally revealed a chilling pattern of calculated manipulation and insidious deception, a web of lies utterly incompatible with the paramount best interests of the innocent child at its center. While the initial, heart-wrenching removal of Leonardo had strictly adhered to protocol, meticulously following the reports that had been filed, it became devastatingly clear that every single one of those reports had been meticulously fabricated, woven into a sinister tapestry as part of a grander, utterly self-serving scheme concocted solely to obtain custody. It was in that moment, under the weight of irrefutable evidence, that Casey's carefully constructed facade, her brutal composure, finally spectacularly shattered. The veneer of calm, maintained through months of calculated performances, splintered into 1,000 pieces. She didn't just burst into tears, rather, a guttural wail tore from her throat, quickly dissolving into raw, disfiguring sobs. These were not the artfully practiced, performative tears she deployed so many times before for her social media audience. No, these were truly ugly, ragged gasps for air, tearing through the strained silence of the room. Her body convulsed with emotion, shoulders shaking violently as she launched into a furious, disjointed tirade. She ranted, her voice cracking with self-pity and fury, about the monumental unfairness of it all. About how she had purportedly loved Leonardo DiCaprio her whole life, an obsession that seemed to underpin her entire rationale. She spoke with a feverish intensity about how she had, since childhood, harbored a lifelong dream of having a son, specifically with that name. Then, with a venomous glare that felt like a physical blow, she pointedly accused me, her own sister, of callously stealing her dream, of leaving her with no other recourse but to take these extreme measures. With each increasingly frantic word, her voice grew shriller, her eyes more wild, her entire demeanor sounding progressively more unhinged, spiraling dangerously close to the precipice of madness. In her desperate unraveling, she began to divulge a torrent of chilling details, secrets we hadn't known, painting a grim picture of her meticulous planning. She chillingly described hiring someone, a shadowy figure, to surreptitiously plant evidence, perhaps incriminating items, forged documents, or even drugs within the sanctity of our home during a planned visitation that, thankfully, had fallen through. She brazenly admitted to having coached witnesses, painstakingly instructing them on precisely what to say, weaving a fictional narrative designed to bolster her false claims. The most disturbing confession, however, was her revelation that she had deliberately gotten pregnant immediately after a baby shower. That joyous occasion meant to celebrate our impending arrival, viewing this desperate act as her only chance to lay claim to the name she coveted so obsessively. A chilling admission that sent a shiver down my spine, as Casey's hysterical confessions echoed, amplified and distorted by the thin, unforgiving walls of the consultation room. A palpable shift occurred in the waiting area just outside. Her supporters, those who had blindly believed her manufactured narrative and rallied around her with unquestioning loyalty, began to stir. The shockwaves of her admissions, the brutal, unvarnished truth pierced through their illusions. One by one, their faces registering a dawning horror and undeniable discomfort, they started to filter out, their initial bravado replaced by a palpable sense of shame. The stark reality of what they had unwittingly, or perhaps willfully, been enabling a calculated scheme of child abduction and character assassination finally became undeniably clear. By the time Casey's cathartic, yet utterly self-serving, meltdown finally subsided, leaving her emotionally drained and spent, the waiting room was eerily empty, a stark void save for the small, silent huddle of our family. The supervisor, her expression a complex mixture of professionalism and palpable relief, calmly called for a recess, allowing the emotional dust to settle. When we reconvened, the air in the room felt lighter, charged with an almost unbelievable sense of impending justice. The decision, when it came, was delivered with a quiet, unwavering swiftness that felt like the snapping of a taut wire. The words themselves were a balm to our tortured souls. Emergency custody, that unjust imposition, was revoked immediately, without hesitation or further deliberation. Leonardo, our precious son, our stolen child, would be returned to us that very day, a proclamation that felt like sunshine after an endless storm. For Casey, the consequences were equally severe and unequivocally clear. She would be granted supervised visitation only, a stark indication of the complete loss of trust, pending a full and comprehensive psychological evaluation to assess her mental state. Furthermore, the numerous fraudulent reports she had meticulously concocted and filed, the very bedrock of her elaborate deception, would be immediately referred for a rigorous criminal investigation, ensuring legal accountability for her egregious actions. Yet, the supervisor wasn't finished. Turning her gaze directly to us, her voice imbued with a somber sincerity, she acknowledged, without equivocation, the profound systems failure, the bureaucratic oversights and vulnerabilities that had allowed our family to be so cruelly exposed to such calculated manipulation and insidious harm. She didn't just apologize, she promised a full, comprehensive review of existing procedures and protocols, a commitment to implementing stringent safeguards to prevent similar, heartbreaking situations from ever occurring again. In addition, recognizing the devastating and well-documented harm inflicted upon our reputations and livelihoods, the professional and personal fallout of Casey's campaign of lies, she strongly recommended that we pursue civil action against Casey for significant damages, a path toward financial restitution, and holding her accountable on every possible front. True to her unrepentant nature, Casey refused to exit gracefully. She had to be physically escorted out by two stern-faced security officers, her departure marked by a furious, almost animalistic torrent of screams and wild accusations about conspiracies and favoritism, her voice echoing with a bitter, delusional indignation. As they steered her past our table, her eyes, burning with an incandescent, unadulterated hatred, locked onto mine. The sheer venom in that gaze was so palpable, so deeply unsettling, that I instinctively flinched, pressing myself closer against Samuel, seeking solace in his protective embrace. It was a chilling testament to her pathological inability to confront reality. Even in the throes of absolute defeat, utterly stripped of her manufactured power, she remained steadfastly unwilling to accept even an iota of responsibility for the monumental devastation she had wrought. Barely an hour later, a lifetime having seemingly passed, I sat in a small, quiet, almost sterile room, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The door creaked open, and a kind-faced caseworker, her expression soft with understanding, gently carried Leonardo into the room, placing him into my outstretched, trembling arms. It had been 5 agonizing, desolate months since he had been cruelly snatched from us, an eternity of longing and despair. But now, in this blessed, miraculous moment, the words reverberated in my mind like a sacred hymn. My son was finally coming home. He was undeniably bigger, his little body more substantial, his eyes brighter, more alert, taking in the world with a newfound curiosity. Yet, the instant I gathered him close, pulling his tiny form against my chest, he nestled into me with an instinctive familiarity, as if not a single second of separation had ever marred our bond. It was an unspoken reaffirmation of our unbreakable connection, a primal comfort that transcended time and trauma. Samuel, overwhelmed with an almost unbearable joy, enveloped both of us in his strong, reassuring arms, creating a sacred circle of 3. And there we stood, a united front, tears of profound relief and unadulterated happiness streaming down our faces, indistinguishable from the raw, ugly sobs of catharsis, simultaneously crying and laughing in a tumultuous symphony of emotion. The ride home was an ethereal, almost dreamlike experience. Leonardo, finally nestled securely in his car seat, gazing out the window with wide, innocent eyes, felt utterly and irrevocably where he belonged. His very presence transformed the mundane journey into a triumphal procession. As we pulled into our driveway, the sight waiting for us solidified the surreal joy. Dad, his face etched with months of worrying but now alight with pure, unadulterated relief, stood waiting on the porch, tears opally streaming down his weathered cheeks. Mrs. Doherty and other dear neighbors, who had steadfastly supported us through the darkest chapters of our ordeal, had gathered, their beaming smiles and outstretched arms forming a warm, welcoming gauntlet to greet our returning hero. And then, stepping inside, the nursery, that once vibrant space that had sat hauntingly empty, a painful echo of our lost for what felt like an eternity, was finally, gloriously, filled once more with the irreplaceable, precious sounds of a baby, our baby. Later that night, the house quiet save for the gentle hum of the refrigerator, I sat in the very rocking chair I had meticulously chosen and purchased while pregnant, its soft fabric now cradling both me and my precious Leonardo. As I gently rocked him to sleep, his tiny, warm body a reassuring weight in my arms, my mind drifted, replaying the arduous, agonizing journey that had finally brought us to this moment of profound peace. It had been a relentless odyssey through a landscape of malicious fabrications, the relentless barrage of false allegations, the venomous social media campaigns designed to smear our names, the devastating financial ruin that had stripped us bare, and the unbearable, soul-crushing emotional torture of separation, all, unbelievably, stemming from the petty, pathological jealousy of my own sister, who simply couldn't accept that I had chosen a name she had coveted for her own imagined child. Yet, despite the unimaginable trials, we had survived. We had weathered the storm. Truth, often a slow and deliberate force, had eventually, mercifully, prevailed, though its victory came at a tremendous, almost incalculable cost. Samuel, my steadfast partner, remained unjustly unemployed, his career derailed by Casey's malicious lies. Dad's once sterling reputation, meticulously built over decades, remained unjustly damaged, a lingering stain that would take years to fade, if ever. And our life savings, painstakingly accumulated over years of hard work, had been completely decimated, swallowed whole by exorbitant legal fees in our desperate fight for justice. Moreover, the insidious trauma of having Leonardo stolen, of feeling that primal bond violently severed, would undoubtedly linger, a deep emotional wound that would take years, perhaps a lifetime, to truly process and heal. Yet, as I gazed down at my sleeping son, his innocent face illuminated by the soft glow of the nightlight, I realized with absolute certainty that none of that, none of the immense cost, truly mattered when weighed against the immeasurable, indescribable joy of simply having our son, our precious Leonardo, finally, irrevocably, home in our arms. The initial week, a precious gift of having Leonardo finally home, tested us in ways we hadn't quite anticipated, presenting its own unique set of challenges that layered over our lingering exhaustion. His delicate sleep schedule, utterly shattered by months of Casey's chaotic and inconsistent caregiving, was in complete disarray. Every 2 hours, like clockwork, he would wake with a sudden, piercing scream, his small body agitated, his head frantically turning, as if searching for the rotating cast of nannies he'd evidently grown accustomed to in Casey's transient household. I spent countless nights, hours bleeding into one another, pacing the quiet halls with him cradled in my arms, a silent vigil of rediscovery. It was a painstaking, yet tender, process of reeling in every nuance of his cries, the hungry wail, the tired whimper, the distressful shriek, deciphering his emerging preferences, and rediscovering the specific, comforting ways he liked to be held, a tender dance of reconnecting. Meanwhile, Samuel, ever the pragmatist, bravely tackled the daunting array of practical challenges that still loomed. He meticulously filed the necessary paperwork, a tedious but vital undertaking, to have every one of Casey's maliciously false reports officially expunged from our official records. A bureaucratic battle to clear our names. Simultaneously, he began the agonizing process of reaching out to his former employer, a crucial step in unraveling the tangled web of lies surrounding his abrupt departure and painstakingly explaining the harrowing and varnished truth. This marked the slow, arduous, and emotionally draining journey of rebuilding his once unblemished professional reputation from the ground up. Each and every one of those phone calls, he confessed, demanded a full, detailed recounting of the entire sordid, nightmarish story, forcing him to relive the trauma. Dissecting the raw wounds of our experience for complete strangers, HR representatives, former colleagues, potential new contacts who, ironically, now held the fragile threads of our future careers in their hands. It was a humiliating and exhausting ordeal, a constant reopening of old wounds. Dad, who had retreated into a profound, self-imposed isolation during the darkest days of the custody battle, a protective shell against the public scrutiny and accusations, began to emerge slowly, tentatively, like a winter-weary bear from its den. His re-entry into our lives started subtly. He would help tirelessly with Leonardo during the day, holding his grandson with an almost reverent tenderness, allowing me precious, much-needed hours to finally catch up on the sleep deprivation that had become my constant companion. I watched him, my heart aching with a mixture of love and sorrow, as he cradled Leonardo, his hands visibly trembling, his voice a barely audible whisper of apologies for things that were unequivocally not his fault, for the pain he felt he had somehow brought upon us. The ghost of an old teaching scandal, a dark chapter from years ago that had long since been resolved, had been cruelly resurrected and weaponized against him once more during Casey's campaign, reopening raw, festering wounds that were now painfully fresh again. Just 3 days after Leonardo's triumphant return, an unexpected, increasingly disturbing phenomenon began. Packages, an incessant stream of them, started arriving at our doorstep. Box after box, filled with an array of baby clothes, some ridiculously expensive, others utterly impractical mountains of plastic toys, and endless samples of baby formula, all meticulously addressed not to us, but to Casey at our home address. It quickly became terrifyingly clear that, in her twisted pursuit, she had maliciously signed us up for every conceivable baby registry, every subscription service she could find, weaponizing our personal information, flooding our lives with unwanted goods. The doorbell, once a welcome sound, became a constant, jarring intrusion, ringing incessantly with deliveries we had neither ordered nor, frankly, could afford to keep, turning our joyous homecoming into a logistical and financial nightmare of her making. Mom, a beacon of unwavering strength and practical support, visited daily, arriving laden with fresh groceries and an inexhaustible supply of comforting words and much-needed emotional solace. Her presence was a lifeline. During these visits, she gradually, cautiously, revealed even more disturbing details about Casey's unsettling time with Leonardo, painting a picture of superficiality and shocking neglect. We learned that the seemingly endless parade of designer outfits Casey had flaunted on social media, purportedly for Leonardo, had been bought on a cascade of maxed-out credit cards she had no intention, or means, of ever paying. Furthermore, a series of crucial specialist appointments for Leonardo, meticulously scheduled, had been routinely missed, never attended, simply because Casey, in her self-absorbed world, couldn't handle the perceived inconvenience or responsibility of taking him alone. Mom also recounted the utterly surreal spectacle of Casey turning a solemn custody hearing into what Mom Riley described as merch night, arriving with her cadre of loyalists, all sporting custom-made Team Leonardo's safety t-shirts, a grotesque display of self-promotion amidst a child's suffering. Does anything scream I'm a stable, fit parent quite like designing and distributing custom apparel for what was essentially your nephew's kidnapping trial? Mom had quipped. A bitter edge to her humor. Casey's carefully curated blog, initially lauded as a touching narrative of her parenting journey, which has successfully attracted a host of unsuspecting sponsors, was now unraveling. These same sponsors, having finally learned the horrifying truth behind her deceptive facade, were vociferously demanding immediate refunds, their partnerships dissolved in scandal. But the revelations grew even more chilling. We discovered, to our utter disbelief and profound horror, that Casey had systematically been telling Leonardo's pediatrician that she was in the process of adopting him. Spinning an elaborate fiction that we, his biological parents, had callously abandoned him due to insurmountable addiction issues. This insidious narrative wasn't just verbal. She had brazenly forged official consent forms, meticulously manufactured false medical histories, and even audaciously listed herself as Leonardo's primary guardian on crucial insurance forms, effectively attempting to erase our very existence as his parents. Entangling this monstrous web of calculated lies and bureaucratic deceit became a Herculean task, consuming countless, frustrating hours on the phone. Navigating a labyrinth of indignant medical offices, skeptical insurance companies, and the compassionate, yet overwhelmed, legal aid organizations, all trying to make sense of the chaos she had deliberately sown. Even after her spectacular downfall, Casey's campaign of deception refused to fully extinguish. Samuel's cousin, who had diligently kept an eye on online activity, forwarded us a series of unsettling screenshots from various parenting groups where Casey, incredibly, remained an active participant. Unfazed by her public humiliation and the irrefutable evidence against her, she had merely pivoted her toxic narrative, now brazenly claiming that we the true victims had somehow manipulated the system to cruelly steal Leonardo from her, asserting with chilling conviction that she had been his true mother all along. It was a testament to her unwavering belief in her own distorted reality. Predictably, some members of these online communities, swayed by her performative victimhood and elaborate tales, tragically believed her, inundating her with messages of misplaced sympathy and offering ill-conceived advice on fighting for her baby. However, mercifully, a growing number of other astute members had begun to notice the glaring inconsistencies in her increasingly desperate stories, their skepticism a tiny glimmer of hope in the digital darkness. Meanwhile, in our own lives, the relentless financial pressure intensified, squeezing us from all sides. Our once robust savings, painstakingly built over years, were utterly gone, completely depleted by the monumental legal battle and the unforeseen costs of Casey's malevolence. Our credit, once impeccable, now stood precariously on the brink. Our credit cards, once a fragile safety net, were now maxed out, utterly depleted by the relentless onslaught of legal fees. Each transaction felt like a deeper plunge into an abyss of financial despair, a tangible representation of how swiftly life could unravel under the weight of unforeseen circumstances. The specter of the looming mortgage payment, a heavy, suffocating weight pressing down on our shoulders, cast a long, dark shadow over our already strained household. Meanwhile, Samuel, with a grim determination etched onto his face, meticulously sent out dozens upon dozens of job applications each day, casting his resume into the vast, indifferent ocean of the job market, each submission a desperate plea for a new beginning. Within our specialized industry, a close-knit world where professional reputation often precedes skill, Samuel's standing had been irrevocably tainted, blackened by the toxic dust of the scandal. Pushed by the relentless financial squeeze and the gnawing anxiety of dwindling savings, I found myself returning to work much earlier than I had ever envisioned or hoped. It was a wrenching decision, leaving our precious Leonardo in my dad's capable, albeit aging, hands during my demanding shifts. Every morning, a pang of guilt twisted in my stomach as I kissed Leonardo goodbye, feeling the heavy pull between my responsibilities as a mother and the stark economic realities of our new normal. My body, a silent testament to the months of relentless stress and the painful separation from Samuel, screamed its protest with every early alarm and every late night. It wasn't just physical fatigue, it was a profound, bone-deep exhaustion, the kind that permeates your very being, a lingering echo of the emotional marathon I had just run, leaving me feeling hollowed out and utterly unprepared for the renewed demands of the workplace. In the hushed hallways and around the water cooler, I could feel the invisible threads of their scrutiny, hear the insidious, barely audible whispers of co-workers who presumed my hearing was as impaired as their discretion. They traded whispered gossip, eagerly dissecting the gruesome details of the custody battle they had, no doubt, morbidly followed on social media, a public spectacle that had transformed our private agony into office entertainment. Each sidelong glance, each muffled chuckle, felt like a barb, deepening my sense of isolation and public humiliation. Amidst this oppressive atmosphere, a few kind souls offered genuine, heartfelt support, a quiet word of encouragement, a comforting hand on my arm, a shared glance of understanding that spoke volumes. Yet a far greater number, unnerved by the proximity to our public drama, meticulously maintained their distance, as if our misfortune were a highly contagious ailment that might somehow infect their own carefully constructed lives, their avoidance a chilling testament to the fickle nature of human empathy. A mere 2 weeks after the emotionally draining hearing, a date that felt both too soon and impossibly distant, Casey made her first attempt at a supervised visit. The air in our home was thick with an almost unbearable tension, a palpable mixture of apprehension and reluctant hope, as we braced ourselves for this new, unsettling chapter. The social worker, a figure of professional neutrality, her demeanor calm but observant, ushered Casey into our sanctuary for what was supposed to be a carefully orchestrated, one-hour session. Her presence, while a necessary safeguard, felt like an intrusion, a stark reminder that our lives were now under constant, external scrutiny. Casey arrived, not with the humility one might expect, but with a brazen, almost theatrical display of her singular obsession. She wore a t-shirt emblazoned with a larger-than-life image of Leonardo DiCaprio's iconic face, a disturbing, literal manifestation of her delusion. In her hand, she clutched a garishly decorated gift bag, overflowing with an assortment of movie memorabilia, each item a silent, unsettling testament to her warped reality, a jarring reminder of the bizarre fantasy world she inhabited. The moment I carefully placed our tiny Leonardo, a beacon of innocent vulnerability, into her waiting arms, Casey's carefully constructed facade cracked. She immediately, and with an almost defiant possessiveness, began calling him Leo, her voice laced with an unsettling insistence that it was a much better nickname, an overt attempt to rebrand him, to make him conform to her preordained fantasy, rather than accepting him as the unique individual he was. Predictably, and with an almost sickening swiftness, the visit began its precipitous descent into chaos, each passing minute drawing us deeper into Casey's distorted perception of reality. Like a relentless critic, Casey launched into a barrage of complaints, each one a thinly veiled attack on our parenting. She scoffed at our carefully chosen nursery decor, suggesting it lacked imagination, then pivoted to a deeply hurtful insinuation, remarking that Leonardo looked thinner, implying neglect where there was only loving care. She went on to subtly, yet pointedly, suggest that we weren't stimulating his development properly, attempting to sow seeds of doubt and guilt, painting us as inadequate parents. When Leonardo, a baby experiencing the natural discomfort of a new environment and unfamiliar presence, inevitably began to fuss, Casey's response was nothing short of astonishingly self-serving. With a dramatic flourish, she declared that he was clearly upset because we turned him against her, a wild, delusional accusation that twisted an infant's natural reaction into a nefarious plot hatched by us. Throughout this agonizing charade, the social worker, maintaining an impeccable veneer of professional neutrality, her face an unreadable mask, diligently scribbled notes. Yet, beneath that composed exterior, her eyes, though discreet, held a flicker of undeniable concern. A subtle widening that betrayed her growing alarm at the escalating peculiarity and possessiveness of Casey's behavior. The moment Casey's unsettling presence finally receded from our home, leaving behind a lingering unease, I began to clean, attempting to erase the lingering traces of her visit. But what I discovered sent a fresh wave of horror through me. She had, with chilling premeditation, hidden a disturbing trail of notes throughout our house. Strategically planted during her seemingly innocent bathroom breaks, the invasion felt deeply personal, a violation of our private space that transcended mere physical presence. These clandestine messages, scrawled with an almost frantic energy, were tucked into the most intimate corners of our home. Flimsy scraps of paper carefully hidden behind cherished picture frames, slipped subtly between the pages of our favorite books, and even cunningly wedged beneath the cushions of our living room couch. Each discovery was a fresh stab of fear, revealing the extent of her intrusive reach. Though varying slightly in their precise wording, the core message of these chilling missives was disturbingly consistent. A relentless echo of her possessive delusion. He's mine, you stole him. And most menacingly, this isn't over. Each phrase was a declaration of war. A dark promise that her campaign against us was far from concluded. The terrifying realization of Casey's stealthy invasion galvanized us into immediate action. Samuel, his face grim with a mixture of anger and protective resolve, spent that evening meticulously installing security cameras, transforming our home into a fortress. That very night, we changed every lock, replacing them with heavy-duty mechanisms, and strategically placed motion sensors around the perimeter. Their silent sentinels, a desperate attempt to reclaim our sense of safety. Simultaneously, we forged a comprehensive safety plan with our understanding neighbors, an unspoken agreement that we would watch out for each other. Recognizing that our private battle had now become a community concern, it was Mrs. Doherty, a kind-hearted matriarch of our street, who, with an inspiring blend of practicality and compassion, took charge. She quickly organized an informal neighborhood watch, rallying residents to keep a vigilant eye out for Casey's distinctive car, transforming our quiet suburban street into a network of watchful protectors. The community, once fractured and swayed by the insidious whispers of Casey's relentless social media campaign, a campaign that had skillfully sowed seeds of doubt and suspicion, now began, slowly but surely, to rally around us. The tangible threat she represented finally cut through the online noise, uniting people in shared concern. The supervised visits, a grim, weekly ritual, continued to unfold, each session more fraught with tension and psychological strain than the one before it. With each successive visit, Casey's gifts grew increasingly, almost comically inappropriate, serving as stark, undeniable evidence of her deepening delusion. She had present adult-sized Leonardo DiCaprio merchandise, clearly meant for her own warped fantasies rather than a baby. There were DVDs of R-rated movies, jarringly labeled for when he's old, as if she planned to be a central figure in his adolescence. The most egregious, perhaps, was a savings bond bizarrely made out to Leonardo DiCaprio Jr., a chilling testament to her absolute inability to distinguish reality from her own elaborate, disturbing fantasy. The diligent social worker, a silent observer whose pen seemed to never stop moving, meticulously documented every single transgression, every inappropriate gift, every delusional utterance. She was painstakingly building an irrefutable case, piece by agonizing piece, for the complete and permanent termination of these increasingly destructive visits. It was during the fourth such visit, a session steeped in familiar tension, that Casey's deception reached a new, more sinister level. With audacious cunning, she managed to smuggle in a hidden camera, ingeniously disguised as an innocent, fluffy teddy bear, an object meant for comfort now turned into an instrument of surveillance. After she'd finally departed, leaving behind her usual residue of anxiety, my dad, with his keen eye for detail, was tidying up. As he picked up the teddy bear, he immediately noticed its unusual, unnatural weight. A closer inspection revealed the tiny, glinting lens of a hidden camera, a chilling invasion of our most private space. A betrayal so profound it left us breathless. The implication was terrifyingly clear. She had been secretly recording our home, our conversations, our lives, undoubtedly scouring the footage for any shred of evidence to concoct new, baseless allegations against us, to further fuel her relentless campaign of harassment. We immediately contacted the police, who, with a weary but professional air, took a detailed report. However, their hands were frustratingly tied. They explained, with an air of practiced regret, that without concrete proof of intended physical harm or a direct, imminent threat, this egregious invasion of privacy was regrettably considered a civil matter, not a criminal one. It was a disheartening revelation, highlighting the frustrating limitations of the legal system in dealing with such insidious psychological warfare. Then, a small, fragile glimmer of hope pierced through the relentless darkness. Samuel, after countless rejections and soul-crushing dead ends, finally secured a job interview. The catch, it was with a company located a grueling 2 hours away, a significant distance that promised an exhausting daily commute. But at that point, any opportunity felt like a lifeline. Remarkably, this company had been fully apprised of our entire, messy public situation, the scandal, the custody battle, the social media storm. Yet, in an astonishing display of understanding and pragmatism, they were willing to look past the sensational headlines and assess Samuel on his own merits, offering a rare chance at redemption. The position itself, while a godsend, came with its own set of compromises. It paid significantly less than his previous, high-flying role, and the daily commute, a 4-hour round trip, promised to be nothing short of brutal. But desperate times called for desperate measures. We were in no position to be choosy, embracing any opportunity that offered a path forward. He departed before the first hint of dawn, the headlights of his car piercing the pre-morning darkness, the weight of our family's future resting heavily on his shoulders. He returned late that evening, utterly exhausted, but with a fragile, almost imperceptible spark of cautious optimism in his eyes, a flicker of hope that we desperately clung to. Just as we began to breathe a collective sigh of relief, another unsettling revelation emerged. My mom, in a chance encounter, discovered that Casey had been brazenly visiting Leonardo's old daycare, confidently spinning a deceitful tale to the unsuspecting workers, claiming she would be resuming care soon, as if our legal victory had never happened. The depth of her manipulative planning was staggering. She had not only filled out extensive enrollment paperwork, meticulously forging documents to support her fabricated narrative, but had even paid a substantial deposit, an amount she clearly couldn't afford, all in a desperate, deluded attempt to insert herself back into Leonardo's life. Thankfully, the astute daycare director, who had been following the tumultuous custody case in the local Facebook groups, immediately recognized Casey's name and the unsettling pattern of her behavior. She contacted us without hesitation, her voice laced with concern and professional alarm. It was yet another infuriating, complex mess to untangle, another insidious example of Casey's relentless attempts to manipulate every system, every institution, in her obsessive quest to reclaim what she believed was hers. Our lives felt like a never-ending game of whack-a-mole, constantly battling her latest scheme. Finally, the comprehensive psychological evaluation, formally ordered by the court, a process we had desperately hoped for, delivered a chilling yet validating confirmation of what we had instinctively, painfully, known all along. The official report painted a stark, clinical picture. Casey exhibited clear, undeniable signs of profound delusional thinking, deeply ingrained narcissistic personality traits that fueled her self-absorption, and a disturbing, almost complete inability to distinguish between the vivid tapestry of her own fantasy world and the harsh, unyielding realities of life. Her long-standing, seemingly innocuous obsession with the actor Leonardo DiCaprio had, the report painstakingly detailed, grotesquely morphed into a deeply entrenched, fixed delusional belief. She was absolutely convinced, with unwavering certainty, that she was divinely destined to bear a son with that very name, a child who would fulfill her warped narrative. Based on these damning findings, the evaluator unequivocally recommended intensive, long-term therapeutic intervention for Casey, coupled with an immediate and indefinite suspension of all visitation rights. It was a lifeline, a desperately needed intervention that offered the promise of true cessation from her torment. Casey's response, though entirely predictable in its pathological defiance, was no less emotionally exhausting to contend with. Her playbook was now sickeningly familiar. Undeterred and unrepentant, she immediately activated a fresh barrage of new social media accounts, meticulously circumventing every block we had painstakingly put in place. From these new platforms, she unleashed a torrent of rambling, tearful videos, hysterically claiming the psychological evaluation was a biased conspiracy. With an audacious flourish, she even launched a public petition, grotesquely titled "Reunite Leo with His Real Mother," a cruel mockery of our family's ordeal. This meant that each individual social media platform, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, had to be contacted separately, painstakingly detailing the violations and demanding the removal of her toxic content. And with every new post, every fresh accusation, we were forced to meticulously document it, adding yet another entry to our ever-growing, increasingly damning harassment file. A grim ledger of her relentless persecution. The call finally came. Samuel got the job. The wave of relief that washed over us was so profoundly overwhelming, so visceral, that it momentarily eclipsed the daunting challenges we knew it would inevitably bring. It was as if a crushing weight, one we hadn't realized the full extent of, had finally been lifted from our collective shoulders. With this job came the promise of fundamental stability. We would have health insurance again, a vital safety net in a world full of uncertainties. More importantly, there would be a steady, predictable income, allowing us to slowly, painstakingly begin the arduous process of rebuilding our utterly decimated savings, brick by financial brick. My dad, a quiet pillar of strength throughout this ordeal, reaffirmed his invaluable offer to continue watching Leonardo during the day. He was fiercely determined to remain useful, to contribute meaningfully, despite his own deeply personal battles with depression. a silent affliction brought on by the public humiliation and cruel judgment he had endured in the wake of Casey's social media spectacle. 3 months had now passed since Leonardo had finally truly come home to us, a period marked by a fragile peace. In an effort to reclaim some semblance of normalcy, we decided to attend a community barbecue, a quintessential slice of suburban life, helping to reconnect with our neighbors. The barbecue, however, was a stark reminder of the long shadow Casey's campaign still cast. Some neighbors, clearly uncomfortable and still swayed by the lingering doubts and distorted narratives, conspicuously avoided us, their eyes darting away whenever ours met. Others, with a quiet strength, offered their continued, understated support, a nod or a gentle word. Most heartbreakingly, children who had once freely played at our house, their laughter echoing through our yard, were now conspicuously absent, their parents, unfortunately, still influenced by the insidious seeds of suspicion and judgment sown by Casey's relentless, poisonous social media campaign. Through the palpable awkwardness and the quiet sting of rejection, Samuel and I held our heads high, exchanging forced smiles. We were fiercely determined to reclaim our rightful place in the neighborhood, to chip away at the lingering prejudice, and to show everyone that our family, though scarred, was unbroken. Later that very night, just as the last vestiges of daylight faded, a terrifyingly familiar figure materialized on our doorstep, shattering the fragile peace we had so painstakingly built. It was Casey, a ghost from our recent past, brazenly violating the no-contact order that was meant to protect us. Her appearance was starkly different from her usual composed, though manipulative, demeanor. She looked utterly disheveled, her clothes ruffled and her hair unkempt. She was noticeably thinner, her cheeks hollowed, and prominent dark circles underscored her eyes, painting a picture of profound distress and neglect. With a dramatic, theatrical flourish, she dropped to her knees on our porch, her body racked with convulsive sobs. She wailed incoherently about losing everything: her apartment, her job, even her once loyal friends who, she tearfully admitted, had finally, irrevocably, seen through her lies. Her pleas were desperate, a raw, almost animalistic cry. She begged, hands clasped in a pleading gesture, to see Leonardo just one last time, swearing with a fervent, yet clearly untrustworthy intensity that she would then leave us alone forever afterward. It was a manipulative gambit, a final, desperate attempt to regain control. Without a moment's hesitation, Samuel, his face a mask of grim resolve, immediately dialed the police. I, meanwhile, stood frozen at the window, peering through the blinds, a silent, helpless observer to the unfolding, heartbreaking drama on our own porch. As Samuel spoke to the dispatcher, Casey continued her tormented display, rocking back and forth on her knees, a disturbing tableau of unraveling sanity. Clutched tightly in her hand, almost a talisman, was a crumpled photo of Leonardo DiCaprio. Her gaze fixed on it as she mumbled incomprehensibly about destiny and stolen dreams, her mind clearly lost in the labyrinth of her own delusions. When the flashing lights of the police cruiser finally illuminated our street, and the officers approached, Casey offered no resistance. In fact, an almost eerie calm settled over her. She seemed strangely, disconcertingly relieved to be gently, yet firmly, led away, as if the burden of her own chaotic existence had become too heavy to bear. This incident, a final, desperate act of defiance, added yet another critical violation to her already extensive legal record, undeniably pushing her further down the path towards the issuance of a permanent restraining order, the ultimate legal shield we desperately sought. The very next morning, an unexpected, almost surreal phone call broke the eerie silence. Casey's former landlord, a disembodied voice on the other end, contacted us about a collection of personal belongings she had abandoned in her hasty departure. Nestled among the mundane items was a peculiar, somewhat rusty key to a storage unit, a silent invitation to uncover what secrets she might have left behind. With a mix of trepidation and morbid curiosity, we followed this strange lead to the storage unit. What we unearthed within its dusty confines was truly chilling, a meticulously curated archive of years, perhaps even a decade, of obsessive planning. Leather-bound journals filled with disturbingly vivid details of her Leonardo DiCaprio fantasies. Meticulously crafted vision boards depicting imagined children, always a boy named Leo, and an unnerving collection of printed articles about custody laws, legal loopholes, and various manipulation tactics. It was irrefutable, tangible evidence of a decade-long delusion so profound, so intricately woven, that we had never, not even in our darkest moments, fully grasped its terrifying depth. We promptly turned over this entire, unsettling collection to the authorities, not merely for our own legal case, but with a desperate, selfless hope that this mountain of evidence might somehow, in some way, contribute to preventing her from ever targeting, and ultimately destroying, another innocent family's life. Even the seasoned detective assigned to our complex harassment case, a man who had undoubtedly witnessed his share of human folly, appeared genuinely shocked, his professional composure briefly giving way to a look of profound astonishment at the sheer, overwhelming scope and meticulousness of Casey's deeply entrenched obsession. He confided that while he had encountered similar unsettling cases of obsession, none quite matched the chilling intensity and detail of Casey's. More importantly, he offered a reassuring nod, commending us for having done everything right in painstakingly documenting every single instance of erratic, invasive, and malicious behavior. A validation that eased some of the lingering self-doubt we carried. 6 months, a period that felt simultaneously endless and fleeting, slowly slipped by. Samuel, with his characteristic resilience, gradually adjusted to the grueling demands of his lengthy commute, transforming the solitary hours on the road into a time for personal reflection and learning. finding solace in an array of captivating podcasts that rendered the arduous journey just a little more bearable. And my dad, slowly but surely emerging from the oppressive cloud of depression that had shadowed him, found a renewed sense of purpose. He began volunteering at the local library, a quiet, welcoming sanctuary where, surrounded by books and gentle camaraderie, he painstakingly began the slow, arduous process of rebuilding his shattered confidence, one small step at a time. Stepping away from the academic world, I plunged back into the demanding currents of full-time employment, the steady rhythm of a 9-to-5 start. Grounding contrast to the intellectual pursuits I had once cherished. Now, every evening, after navigating the daily grind, felt like a sacred ritual, moments with Leonardo becoming infinitely more precious, burnished by the harsh light of our recent, painful separation. The gnawing anxiety of financial strain, a constant companion during those tumultuous months, began to recede, albeit gradually, like a stubborn tide. While our immediate needs were met, the mountain of legal fees and accumulated expenses meant a debt that would shadow us for years, a persistent, unwelcome souvenir of the battle we'd fought. Unsurprisingly, Casey's court-ordered supervised visits never materialized. The judicial system, in its wisdom, had mandated she complete comprehensive psychological therapy before even a fleeting thought of contact could be entertained. Yet, her unyielding pride, a fortress built of denial, utterly prevented her from acknowledging even the slightest hint of wrongdoing. How could a broken bond possibly heal when one party steadfastly refused to admit fault, seeing themselves only as a tragic victim? Through the insidious whispers of distant family gossip, Mom eventually learned Casey had vanished, relocating to another state. There, like a venomous echo, she was reportedly weaving a fabricated narrative, painting herself as the grieving mother whose beloved son had been cruelly stolen from her grasp. The chilling cycle of manipulation and distorted reality, a malignant seed, was clearly taking root elsewhere, even though authorities had been rigorously informed of her past conduct. Their hands unfortunately tied by jurisdictional boundaries. Meanwhile, Leonardo, blissfully unaware of the dramatic storm that had raged around his early months, grew and thrived with an astonishing resilience. He learned to crawl in the very nursery, a space once deemed inadequate by her, that had become his sanctuary. His first tentative steps were taken in the home she had so desperately, so maliciously, tried to have him removed from. And his first word, Dada, a sweet, lisping sound directed at Samuel during a quiet, sun-drenched Sunday morning. These simple, everyday moments became incredibly precious, burnished by the searing memory of how agonizingly close we had come to losing them all. The community, with its insatiable appetite for novelty, gradually forgot the scandal, moving on to newer, fresher gossip like a flock of birds migrating to a different feeding ground. Some relationships, however, never truly recovered. The delicate lattice of trust had been irrevocably shattered by the swiftness with which people had believed the lies, the whispers, the unfounded accusations. But amidst the wreckage, we had found our true supporters, the unwavering pillars who had stood by us when it mattered most, their loyalty a comforting anchor in the storm. Mrs. Ida, with her silver hair and twinkling eyes, became Leonardo's honorary grandmother, showering him with homemade treats that smelled of cinnamon and love, and a fierce, almost primal, protection that radiated from her very core. 1 year after the bruising custody battle had finally concluded, I found myself walking into Leonardo's nursery, and for the very first time, I didn't feel the chilling, ghostly echo of those empty, agonizing months. The room was no longer a symbol of loss but a vibrant tableau, cluttered joyfully with bright toys, well-worn picture books, and countless other pieces of evidence of a child well-loved, truly present, and undeniably thriving. I gently picked up the stuffed elephant, a treasured gift from my late friend's mother, and began to tell Leonardo the story I had always planned to share, the poignant tale of his namesake. A man of profound grace and spirit, Samuel found me there later, Leonardo asleep, warm and heavy in my arms, his tiny chest rising and falling rhythmically. We sat together in the gathering dusk, bathed in the soft, fading light. No words were needed between us. The profound silence spoke volumes. Our son was home. Our family, against all odds, was intact, a testament to our enduring love despite everything thrown our way. The scars, undoubtedly, would always be their subtle etchings on our souls, reminders of the profound ordeal. Trust, once freely given, was now harder to extend, a fragile commodity. And a certain innocence, once unblemished, had been irrevocably lost. But we had survived Casey's relentless obsession, a shadow that had once threatened to engulf us. We had protected our child with every fiber of our being. We had discovered a profound wellspring of strength we didn't even know we possessed. As I gently tucked Leonardo into his crib that night, his little body curled peacefully. I thought about the name that had, in a strange twist of fate, started everything. Such a simple, heartfelt choice, honoring a lost friend, had somehow unleashed such chaos, such turmoil. But watching my son sleep peacefully, utterly safe and secure in his own room, a heaven we had fought tooth and nail for, I knew I wouldn't change a single thing. He was Leonardo, named for love and memory, a living tribute, not for an actor's fleeting fame or anyone else's distant, manufactured dreams. The future stretched ahead, now filled with the wonderfully mundane, yet deeply cherished, normal challenges of parenthood. Teething woes, the intricate dance of potty training. The significant decisions about schooling, these were the ordinary parental concerns that felt like precious gifts after the extraordinary ordeal we had endured. Casey remained a shadow at the edges of our lives, a cautionary tale whispered about the insidious dangers of obsession and unbridled entitlement. but she no longer held any real power over our lives. We had learned to document everything with meticulous care, to trust cautiously but deeply, and to cherish the most ordinary, unassuming moments that others often took for granted. Our son would grow up knowing, unequivocally, that he was fought for, protected fiercely, and loved beyond measure. That, ultimately, was the only truth that truly mattered. And now to you, dear reader, thanks for hanging out with me, for your patient attention, and for diving into all this weird, intense stuff. It's kind of wild, isn't it? A journey, indeed. I truly appreciate you being here for the ride. Till next time, stay curious out there, keep exploring the intricate tapestries of human experience. And hey, if you found this compelling, do me a solid, like the video. It genuinely helps more than you might think, allowing these stories to reach more ears and resonate with more hearts.